In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. Today, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, finally fell on his sword after the child sex abuse scandal he was accused of ignoring simply became too big to ignore. Riddled with scandal, yet consumed by woke, moralising politics. What next for the embattled Church of England? Last night, a former aide to Tony Blair told GB News that Labour should do to the farmers what Thatcher did to the coal miners. I'll be joined by the furious editor of Farmers Weekly, who's leading a farmers' rebellion, calling on the government to do a U-turn. And as Donald Trump looks set to stop funding the Ukraine war and order the European Union nations to cough up more cash for NATO, is the EU army planning to secretly expand? Well, I'll be joined by the guard dog of Brexit, Ben Habib, who warns Brussels is on military manoeuvres. And Donald Trump, of course, declared war on illegal immigration in his presidential campaign. And today, he's hired Tom Homan as his border czar, a former Border Patrol cop. Homan is renowned as one of America's baddest politicians and has warned millions of illegal aliens to start packing. We'll have the full story on the guy they're calling the Darth Vader of woke. And talking of which, first there was Welby, and now another high priest of woke is on his way out, as Gary Lineker is set to step down for his £1.3 million match of the day gig. Who should replace him? Well, I'll be joined by his former match of the day buddy, Mark Lawrenson. That's all coming up in your next hour. Well, it's the show. It's a pleasure to have your company. Well, perhaps it was inevitable. In the end, the scandal enveloping Justin Welby and the Church of England was simply too big to ignore. For many, many years, Justin Welby seemed to know about the sex scandal that was enveloping the church, and the evidence was ignored. The priest in question was able to pass away, having evaded justice, leaving survivors and victims forever thinking they were betrayed by the Church of England. What is next for the Church of England? Can it survive this latest scandal? What does it need to do to win back public trust and its diminishing flock? Get in touch, gbnews.com/your say. But now here's your headlines, and it's Sophie Reaper.
Thank you, Martin. It's just after 3 o'clock and let's take a look at your latest headlines. The Archbishop of Canterbury has resigned following a damning report into a prolific child abuser associated with the Church of England. The report concluded that Justin Welby had failed to act after learning about the abuse by John Smythe QC in 2013. In a statement, Welby said the following: "Having sought the gracious permission of His Majesty the King, I've decided to resign as Archbishop of Canterbury. The Macon Review has exposed the long-maintained conspiracy of silence about the heinous abuses of John Smythe. When I was informed in 2013 and told that police had been notified, I believed wrongly that an appropriate resolution would follow. It is very clear that I must take personal and institutional responsibility for the long and re-traumatising period between 2013 and 2024. In politics, the Prime Minister has pledged an 81% cut to UK emissions by 2035 at the UN Climate Summit in Azerbaijan. Sir Keir Starmer says there is what he called a huge opportunity for the UK to lead the world in the economy of tomorrow, which he said will mean better jobs and economic growth in the UK. Here's what the Prime Minister had to say earlier on today.
Let me be clear. There is no national security. There is no economic security. There is no global security without climate security. And this is a huge opportunity for investment, for UK businesses, for British workers, if we act now to lead the world in the economy of tomorrow.
Terminally ill adults who are expected to die within 6 months would be able to request assistance to end their own life under the new proposed end-of-life bill. But someone with a disability or mental health issue would not be eligible. The controversial bill has raised some concerns that people could feel pressured into ending their lives prematurely. MPs will have their first vote on the proposals on the 29th of November. A once-a-day pill that could help tens of thousands of people give up cigarettes and prevent thousands of smoking-related deaths each year will be rolled out on the NHS. The pill works by tackling nicotine cravings and also helps with withdrawal symptoms such as irritability and trouble sleeping. Official estimates say it could help more than 85,000 people give up smoking over the next 5 years, as well as prevent up to 9,500 smoking-related deaths. Wage growth has fallen to its lowest level in more than 2 years, whilst joblessness has jumped by more than expected. The Office for National Statistics says the average regular earnings growth eased back to only 4.8% in the 3 months to September. That's down from 4.9% in the previous 3 months. This marks the lowest level since June 2022. The ONS also says the rate of UK unemployment rose from 4% to 4.3% in the previous 3 months. Boris Johnson has told GBNews that Sir Keir Starmer is not doing enough to stop foreign criminals in the UK. The former PM says it's time to review the ECHR and says the Rwanda plan would have worked. It comes as the number of migrants crossing the English Channel in small boats is likely to hit 40,000 by the end of the year, according to maritime security sources. Almost 33,000 have already made the illegal journey so far this year. Here's what former PM Boris Johnson had to say on GB News last night.
And I really believe that would have been a huge deterrent to illegal migration. It would have been a huge deterrent. It might be time to review the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights, because I think sometimes it is being applied in a way that is anti-democratic and that is stopping the removal of people who plainly need to be removed.
And finally, Gary Lineker will step down as host of Match of the Day at the end of the current season. The 63-year-old former England striker has presented Match of the Day since 1999, but now Mark Chapman, Gabby Logan and Alex Scott are the current frontrunners to replace the former England star. For now, those are your latest GB News headlines. I'm Sophie Reaper. It's back to Martin.
Thank you, Sophie. Now, breaking news this afternoon. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, has finally resigned. He was under increasing pressure after reports criticised his handling of the allegations against John Smythe, who sexually abused hundreds of children in the 1970s and 1980s. In a statement issued a short while ago, Justin Welby has said this: "It is very clear that I must take personal and institutional responsibility for the long and re-traumatising period between 2013 and 2024. I hope this decision makes clear how seriously the Church of England understands the need for change and our profound commitment to creating a safer church. As I step down, I do so in sorrow with all victims and survivors of abuse. I believe that stepping aside is in the best interest of the Church of England, which I dearly love and which I have been honoured to serve. I pray that this decision points us back towards the love that Jesus Christ has for every one of us." Well, let's head over now to Lambeth Palace now and speak to GBNews' correspondent Olivia Utley, who is on the scene. Olivia Utley, you've been outside Lambeth Palace throughout the day. There was a sense of inevitability that this decision would arrive, and arrive it has. Tell us more.
Well, absolutely. From this morning, it felt as though Justin Welby's position was untenable. Last week, the Archbishop of Canterbury said that he had considered resigning, but had decided against it. He thought that he could and should remain in his post, but his mind was changed, and it does feel a little as though he was pushed rather than jumped, because 3 members of the Synod, the upper echelons of the Church of England, along with a whole host of John Smythe's victims, and then this morning the Archbishop of Newcastle, all said that it was time for Welby to step aside. To make matters worse, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, made a sort of opaque statement last night where he didn't come down on one side or the other, but this morning he'd actually very much toughened up his view. He said that it was a matter for the Church of England, but he didn't want to downplay how serious these terrible allegations were. And lots of people in the Church of England and in Parliament too read that as a condemnation of the Archbishop of Canterbury by the Prime Minister, which made Welby's position pretty much untenable. There was to be a meeting this afternoon in Church House where it would be made clear to Lambeth Palace just how seriously Parliament took these allegations, and it would basically, Parliament, it sounded like, was going to put a bit of pressure on Welby to resign, but he has jumped the gun and stood down at about 2 o'clock today. This resignation, of course, plunges the Church of England into yet another crisis. Justin Welby had made himself a very overtly political archbishop, perhaps more so than any of his predecessors. He spoke out against the previous government's Rwanda plan in very, very political terms. He talked about vaccines, about the importance of getting vaccines. He has made himself a very, very political archbishop, and there are lots of Conservatives now who would like to see him replaced by more of a small c Conservative. It does feel now as though the battle for the heart and soul of the Church of England is on.
Thank you very much for that update on the dramatic resignation of Justin Welby. That's Olivia Utley there, live from Lambeth Palace. Now, let's continue this conversation. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the Associate Professor at the University of Cambridge, Dr. James Orr. Dr. Orr, welcome to the show. A huge fan of your output, I have to say. Let's start with the big question. This is a hugely damaging episode once again for the Church of England. After the inevitable post-mortem, what did Welby know, and when did he know it, and why did he fail to act? Dr. Orr, what next for the Church of England? How can it salvage its battered reputation from this latest terrible scandal?
Well, good to be with you, Martin. I should say that, in the first instance, it's a great personal tragedy for Justin Welby that he's had to do this. But I think one should just emphasise the fact that he's acted with honour. He's acted out of respect for the institution, and I hope that this will have a kind of a closural effect on this sort of this ugly, re-traumatising part of the process. And clearly, Welby's successor is going to have to put in place plans that will lead to the church acknowledging the gravity of the Smythe scandal. And I should say, I think, to his credit, Welby has been working very hard over recent years to put in place a very complex regime of safeguarding to make sure that what happened in the 1980s and 90s does not happen again. So we'll simply have to see who the successor is. There'll clearly be enormous sort of ideological ruptures in the church right now. Of course, it's going through an intense period of self-examination over the most sort of contentious cultural issues of the day. And I know that there will be many who would probably have preferred that Welby had resigned over other matters earlier than he has done now. Of course, the Global South, the Anglican Communion, has rejected what they perceive to be his accommodation of liberal secular values and other conceptions of same-sex relations. And so, he looks, he's really can look back on the Church of England now as he leaves as, for the first time, really, it is no longer seen as the mothership of the Anglican Communion, and the position of Archbishop of Canterbury is no longer seen as first among equals, primus inter pares, within the global Anglican Communion. And I think that will be as sad a legacy as the one for which he's resigned earlier today.
James, do you think there's a deeper issue here, and that is this dabbling, as you said, with liberal politics has made people feel that the church has completely lost its way? The phrase holier than thou seems designed for somebody like Justin Welby, lecturing us continually on climate change, despite the fact for 11 years he was an oil executive for ELF and a great fan of Greta Thunberg, lecturing us on Brexit, on immigration, on vaccines, on Black Lives Matter, on you name it, and seeming to forget the heart and soul of Christianity and what Christian values are, while all the time, in the background, there's this feeling he was protecting his own with little virtue for the values of true Christianity. Those poor souls who've been damaged forever by what happened with John Smythe seem to be at the bottom of his list. Meanwhile, Welby was continually pontificating to the rest of us about how holy he was.
I think it's true that there's been a set of kind of a double standards and a clear asymmetry in the way he's approached many contentious political issues. Nobody denies that Christian leaders should not be invested in matters of public concern, should not express a view about issues of public concern, and should not, express a personally felt view. But I think there has been a perception that he has tended to jump on secular, hyper-progressive bandwagons. That's particularly true of his rhetoric on climate change and net zero, on immigration and refugees and the Rwanda bill, where there was a sort of clear implication in those issues that there was a particular Christian line to take, when it's quite obvious that reasonable, sincere Christians disagree about these questions. That was especially true, for example, over Brexit, not just true of Welby, but indeed the entire House of Bishops. I think whether or not you were an Anglican was one of the best predictors of whether or not you would vote Brexit. And yet there was this enormous gap between pulpit and pew, which sort of matches the secular gap between the metropolis and the world beyond the M25. And I think there's been a justified sense, that Welby simply didn't try to bridge that gap.
And James, another thing that has come out in this, we have a police force that now has an independent complaints authority. Is it time for there to be an independent body that looks over the church? There's a feeling, is there not, of historical and perpetual cover-ups of acts like this, sex abuse acts, not just in the Church of England, but in other churches too. The Reverend Richard Coles, he's been outspoken on this. He said that reform of the church begins with somebody else safeguarding the Church of England in an independent way. So anytime an allegation like this comes to the surface, it can't be buried in the back room. It's front and centre, and somebody independently marks the church's own homework.
I'd be wary about developing legal regimes or enforcement regimes that pick out particular corners of the institutional landscape in this country. I think it would be, one shouldn't apply sort of we should be wary of applying double standards. We should be wary, in particular, of responding to awful tragedies and scandals like this, which were horrific and yet localized. In fact, I remember myself that the echoes of the scandal at Winchester, where I was at school. In fact, many of the boys in my boarding house 10 years before had been affected by the tragedy. But it was, I think we need to be cautious before we put in a sort of universally applied regime. And really, this is always going to be a matter for the police and for the police to decide on criminal liability, for the survivors and their advisors to decide on civil liability. So I would be wary about sort of ecclesial or church-specific police commissions or regimes. This is clearly a sort of a horror that is not limited to the church as an institution. We've seen it in the BBC. We've seen it in hospitals. We've seen it in schools. And thank goodness that at long last the nation is waking up to these horrors and will be a lot more alert to them occurring in the future.
Thank you for your insight. Magnificent stuff. That's Dr. James Orr, the Associate Professor at the University of Cambridge. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon on GB News. I've got some more breaking news for you now. A man has been arrested after reports of a person carrying knives outside the Houses of Parliament. We'll bring you more updates on that story throughout the rest of the programme. Now, next, I'll be joined by the furious editor of Farmers Weekly, who's leading a farmers' rebellion, calling on the government to do a U-turn. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
We're talking about Gareth Southgate and his proposed Donald. There's a lot of rumours going around saying he's going to get a knighthood. So people like Nana are saying to me, why?
Because he hasn't won anything, has he? Look, I'm not a big fan of football. I watch England and the big matches, but he hasn't won anything. I mean, like, he hasn't actually won anything. He'll be following in the footsteps of people like Sir Alf Ramsey, Sir Bobby Robson, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
What has Gareth Southgate actually won?
Right, don't ask me. Let's ask our guests on this. So, has he truly earned the right to do this? Should all England managers, should you become an England manager and then get a knighthood as a result, or is that devaluing the honour? There you see on your screen to debate this, Harry Harris, top football writer, and royal commentator Angela Levin. She knows a thing or two about all of this. Angela, what do you think?
I think absolutely not. I mean, I know he's a good example to people, but he's a sort of almost. He's almost done this. He's almost won that. You can't have someone to have a knighthood if you're an almost. You can't. This is someone who does the most amazing things. This is a hero. This is a serviceman. It's not somebody who does really kindly and looks after his people, and it's just not fun. I think it just diminishes the whole thing of giving people such a high level of gratitude.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Time is 3:22. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, it's Farmageddon, because in an interview with GB News last night with Patrick Christie's former Labour advisor John McTernan had this to say about British farmers.
Do to farmers what Margaret Thatcher did to miners, which was, and she used very heavy-handed police tactics, followed by what? Putting them out of business.
if people are so upset that they want to go on the streets and spray slurry on them, then we don't need the small farmers.
Now, as a coal miner's son, that, John, is not on. And our political editor, Christopher Hope, has today asked Sir Keir Starmer about those comments.
Tax plans for farmers. John McTernan, a former aide to Tony Blair, of course, the Labour Prime Minister, says your party wants to do to the farmers what Thatcher did to the miners. It's an industry we can do without. Is that what you think about farming?
No, I totally disagree. I'm absolutely committed to supporting our farmers. I said that before the election, and I say it after the election. That is why in our budget last week I was very pleased that we're investing £5 billion of our budget over the next 2 years into farming. That is really important for our farmers, and I will do everything I can to support them, because I think it's essential that they not only prosper, but prosper well into the future. So I totally disagree with those comments.
Well, Sir Keir Starmer spitting feathers at those comments. So let's bring in somebody else who is now. That's the editor of Farmers Weekly, Andrew Meredith. Andrew, welcome to the show. Absolute delight to have you on. Can we start by calling up your magazine cover this week? I'm a former magazine editor myself. I saw this cover on the internet. Let's get it on the screen. I think it's brilliant. It says the message. Let's get it on screen now. It's the back page of the magazine. I can't read those words out. I've been told by my boss it's not appropriate, but you can see them on your screen. Very, very effective magazine communication. Well done on that, James. Well done on that, Andrew. Andrew, let's get back to you now, and I want to ask you about the mounting feeling amongst British farmers of this absolute betrayal that many, many feel. And indeed, is the National Farmers Union playing too much like Queensberry rules? Tell us the mood.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for having me on, and tribute to Dave Simmons, the cartoonist who did that front cover as well. We're really pleased to feature his work in Farmers Weekly. And it is an interesting mood, certainly in the farming industry at the moment. I think the two events that are happening in London a week today will really speak to the strength of feeling that is out there at the moment. And it illustrates, really, I think, the two ways in which people think that they can exert pressure on the Labour Party to get this changed. So on the one hand, you have the NFU wanting to put farmers directly in front of their constituency MPs, and many of those rural MPs are new MPs for the Labour Party. They're winning in seats they hadn't won before for a long time at the last election. They've got marginal constituencies. Can the fear be put into them to exert pressure from within on Rachel Reeves? Or the event sort of outside in Westminster more generally, the protest that's trying to win over the court of public opinion to farming side. So what is the most effective way to do it? Well, if the Labour Party does change tack after next week, I guess we'll conclude that it was a bit of both. But I think you're seeing the two schools of thought there as to how to fix this problem.
Well, Andrew, it's absolutely one thing for sure, and that is GB News viewers are fully supportive of farmers. They get the concept of no farmers, no food. They understand that if you kick an industry for long enough, it will simply refuse to respond. We're hearing, we've had farmers come on this show, Andrew, telling us that their colleagues are thinking about downing tools, about effectively going on strike to stop food supplies getting to the shelves. Maybe it will take something as dramatic as that before people in the metropolitan bubble who get used to their cellophane-wrapped delivery on-demand lifestyle. Maybe it takes something as dramatic as that, Andrew, for them to finally realise, for you guys, enough is enough.
It may well, and I think you have hit the nail on the head there in that this measure shouldn't be seen in isolation, as I think some of the people who are criticising farmers at the moment are seeing it. This is not an attack, the first attack on an industry. This is an industry that feels already under attack from the rapid change in farm policy post-Brexit, obviously the weather, not that can be controlled, and also inflation has had a massive impact on agriculture's fortunes the last few years. So even though some critics would say this is a mild measure that affects only a limited number of farmers, I think what the industry feels like is it's yet one more thing to have to deal with on an industry that's already had so much profit and already squeezed out of it.
And Andrew, a colleague of mine told me a statistic last night, which I believe came from Farmers Weekly. I found it astonishing. Apparently, he told me 55% of farmers voted for Labour at the last election. I thought it'd be far fewer than that, a bit like old age pensions. Is that true? And again, from what you're hearing, are any of those farmers having a severe dose of buyer's regret?
I don't know, actually, the statistics on that. Certainly, our sentiment survey, which we run annually, showed that there was enormous dissatisfaction with the outgoing Conservative government, or the different Conservative administrations within the 14 years of their rule, the cumulative impact of the decisions that they made, which also had a negative impact on farming's fortunes. So farmers were among those groups of people who had swing voters in their ranks, and I think a lot took them, the Lib Dems, and a lot took them to Labour too. And, you know, Labour absolutely nowadays is seen as the metropolitan party, the party that has to go the furthest, I think, to win farmers over. But, you know, over the broad sweep of post-war history, it has also been the party that has on occasions given farming some of its best fortunes. So maybe it needs to go back to the history books and look at what it did in the past to support domestic industries, including agriculture.
Andrew, I think that's a really, really valid point. There's definitely a feeling that successive governments have taken farmers for granted or taken their eye off the ball, or are they simply so far divorced now from the countryside, from the rural way of life, from the supply chain, by the reality of the situation, they've just kind of lost the plot?
It's possible, isn't it? I think it is harder, you know, when they were thinking up their election-winning strategies, I'm sure that farmers didn't feature strongly among them. I think they were going after other cohorts, you know, red walls and blue walls and various things. And, you know, I think a lot of people, including farmers, do recognise that the state of the national finances more generally are difficult, and there is a lot of need out there, our NHS, our military. But, you know, food security has to be a part of those conversations. It can contribute to, you know, national health, the right diet. It can contribute to defence by having a homegrown food supply. I think the problem is people are looking at these industries in isolation rather than looking at the virtuous overall picture and where a good supply of healthy food fits into that. It's absolutely vital, obviously, isn't it, to our nation's vitality.
It certainly is. Thank you very much for joining us on today's show. That's Andrew Meredith, the editor of Farmers Weekly. Please keep up the good work. Now let's bring in the former Labour spokesman, James Matthewson. James, welcome to the show. Once again, no doubt those in the Labour HQ are banging their heads against the wall about a rogue comment from John McTernan. Sir Keir Starmer, of course, quick to stamp down on that. You know, it's offensive, it's hurtful to say. Bringing up the ghost of Margaret Thatcher to weaponise against farmers is a terrible thing to have done. Do you not agree?
Yeah, I also don't think it makes any sense, really, because trying to compare coal miners and farmers together is, you know, an irrelevant thing, because obviously, as we know from the strike in '84, and those of us who lived, you know, in coal mining communities in the wake of that and had family members who were involved in the strike, I know that it's a completely different kettle of fish. We're talking about people who own their own land here. We're talking about landowners. Predominantly, you know, we're not talking about tenant farmers even, who make up 30% of the stock of farms in the country. We're talking about landowners, people who own land and own quite a bit of land as well, a lot of the time. So, you know, it's not going to affect, this policy is not going to affect 70% of farmers, but it is important that the government still listens to people. I think Andrew, who you've just had on, was a great credit to the farming community. You know, he's making the points very clearly. He's not outraged. He's not spitting feathers in the way that some of those in the NFU seem to be doing. But we have to remember that because of this difficult situation with the public finances, with the finances the government has inherited, there is no easy way forward. When they did the Rose Garden speech, you know, way back when, this is exactly the kind of thing that we're talking about, because there was going to be dissatisfaction. But when it comes between somebody on universal credit who has absolutely nothing and somebody who owns swathes of land and is farming that land through their own choice and through their own career decisions, where does the axe fall? I mean, between the two of them, there's no comparison, really.
Well, the axe has fallen on multi-generational farmers whose farms, through no dint of their own, certainly not through a great deal of profit, is worth over £1 million. We speak to farmers all the time who tell us it's more like 2/3 of farms are worth over £1 million, and when they die, they'll be forced to sell, and they won't be able to keep that going. A quick 30 seconds, James Mathieson, do you think the Labour Party have bitten off more than they can chew with farmers?
No, I think there'll be a storm in a teacup. I think it's important that they involve them in the discussions. I don't think there should be any kind of standoff here or any kind of war, any kind of discussion. Our farmers are important. And even though many of them hold very conservative values and are in very conservative parts of the country, many people who I went to school with who are now farmers from the community, I'm from in Northumberland, have completely different polar opposite views to me. We have a good crack about it when I go back. But they should still be involved in that discussion, crucially by the government. But in the meantime, government has to make very difficult decisions. And like we're seeing in America, if billionaires, if rich people start pulling the strings of influence in government, then it is not good for everyday working people. We need to listen to people who have less than people who have more.
OK, superb. Thanks for your opinions. As ever, former Labour spokesman James Mathieson, thanks for joining me on GB News. Now, loads more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including, does the assisted dying bill have the strictest safeguards anywhere in the world? Well, the MP behind it seems to think so. We'll discuss that next. But first, here's your latest news headlines, and it's Sophie Reaper.
Good afternoon. Let's take a look at your latest GB News headlines. We're starting with a developing story now. A man has been arrested following reports of a person carrying knives outside the Houses of Parliament. The Metropolitan Police has said that their officers attended and a 34-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of possession of an offensive weapon in a public place. The area was cordoned off during the incident and the entrance was closed. The Archbishop of Canterbury has resigned following a damning report into a prolific child abuser associated with the Church of England. The reports concluded that Justin Welby had failed to act after learning about the abuse by John Smythe QC in 2013. In a statement, Welby said the following: "Having sought the gracious permission of His Majesty the King, I've decided to resign as Archbishop of Canterbury. The Macon Review has exposed the long-maintained conspiracy of silence about the heinous abuses of John Smythe. When I was informed in 2013 and told that the police had been notified, I believed wrongly that an appropriate resolution would follow. It is very clear that I must take personal and institutional responsibility for the long and re-traumatising period between 2013 and 2014. The Prime Minister has pledged an 81% cut to UK emissions by 2035 at the UN Climate Summit in Azerbaijan. Sir Keir Starmer says there is what he called a huge opportunity for the UK to lead the world in the economy of tomorrow, which he said would mean better jobs and economic growth in the UK. Here's what the Prime Minister had to say earlier on today.
Let me be clear. There is no national security. There is no economic security. There is no global security without climate security. And this is a huge opportunity for investment, for UK businesses, for British workers, if we act now to lead the world in the economy of tomorrow.
Queen Camilla will return to public duties today following her chest infection. The Queen is attending the Booker Prize reception at Clarence House today, but will meet guests for a shorter period than initially planned. She was forced to withdraw from her duties last week and missed the weekend's Remembrance Day commemoration events. And finally, Gary Lineker will step down as host of Match of the Day at the end of this current season. The 63-year-old former England striker has presented Match of the Day since 1999, amounting to 26 years in the role. Lineker was the BBC's highest-paid on-air talent for 7 consecutive years, but now Mark Chapman, Gabby Logan and Alex Scott are the current frontrunners to replace the former England star. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophie Reaper. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a fine day for most of us out there, but there is some fog remaining in places and there'll be further fog continuing overnight. Also some frost under this area of high pressure which is keeping the weather settled at the moment, and it's a clearer area of high pressure compared with last week. And that means less low cloud, although there is still some patchy cloud, especially for East Anglia and the southeast overnight. Some showers running into Kent, along with a brisk breeze. At the other end of the country, northwest Scotland prone to thickening cloud and some drizzle overnight. That keeps it mild, but in between, a slice of clear sky and some frost and fog to wake up to first thing Wednesday. So for northwest Scotland, it's a milder start to the day with cloud and drizzle coming in from the northwest. And that's going to slowly spread its way southeastwards through the day. But it's bright enough for Aberdeenshire into the Grampians first thing. Northern Ireland, a fairly mixed bag in the morning with a lot of cloud cover, some mist and fog patches. Wales, plenty of bright weather. That's also extending into parts of the Midlands and northern England, although some fog and frost will be about first thing. Fog and frost free in the southeast where we've got some cloud and some showers early on, but actually the showers largely disappear by the afternoon as the wind direction changes. Meanwhile, cloud spreads across much of Scotland, avoiding the east but also spilling into Northern Ireland, and it'll be a milder day in the northwest with highs of 12 or 13 Celsius. Plenty of bright weather further south though, and we end the afternoon with some sunny spells for the south and southeast after a relatively cloudy start. Nevertheless, it does turn cloudy fairly widely on Wednesday night, and into Thursday we keep that cloud cover, so a milder start to the day, but then it turns colder during Friday and Saturday from the north.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley, just on the Scottish side of the Scottish-English border in Arkleton, in Dumfries and Galloway. The A7 by the church still queuing. A collision there means the roads are blocked. Vaughan Way in Leicester, that's the A594. It's blocked by Causeway Lane and queuing. There's been a collision. A bump too in Brentford in London, that means the A4, the Great West Road westbound. At Boston Manor Road blocked and slow going back towards the Ealing Road junction. Staying in London, Chingford the North Circular westbound at the Cooks Ferry interchange, big queues at the scene now of a serious collision. And if you're heading for the southbound side of the M3 in Hampshire, there's a breakdown on the carriageway just around the Chandler's Ford turn-off for the A13. So looking at the live cameras, a lane shut there and naturally delays building on the approach. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:40. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, a 6-month expected lifespan and the ability to administer the fatal drugs will be the requirements for someone to end their own life under proposed assisted dying legislation. Mental health issues and disability have been ruled out as reasons to die, and MPs vote in just over 2 weeks' time. Let's bring in now the chairman of the Religious Alliance for Dignity in Dying, Dr. Jonathan Romain. Dr. Jonathan, welcome to the show. So it's a hugely contentious topic. You and I have spoken about this before. I know you believe very, very passionately in this issue. Tell me, are you satisfied with the framework and the direction of travel of this legislation and the way the vote's going?
Yes, I'm very impressed by Kim Ledbetter's bill because really what she's done is two things. Firstly, she's learned from all the other jurisdictions in the world as to what works best for them. So she hasn't invented this out of the blue, but she's also taken enormous advice from people in this country, whether it's people in the medical world or palliative care or faith groups or legislators, to see how this can work and work well. Because obviously it's a two-pronged bill, isn't it? We want to just make sure everyone is protected, so it's only the right people who can have this access. In other words, they have to be, and it's 3 red lines, terminally ill, mentally competent, and want it of their own free will. So we want to protect those red lines. But on the other hand, we want to allow people who are suffering, who are at the very end of their life, and who want to let go, to do so gently. We all want to have as good a life as possible, don't we? So why should we not have as good a death as possible?
And yet, of course, there are very serious concerns that we must raise. Of course, the way this has gone in countries such as Canada, where they too initially passed this legislation with robust safeguards, but they found it was liberalised and relaxed as time went on. We've heard, frankly, horrifying stories of armed forces veterans who've been allowed the right to end their lives, of people who are disabled, people who are depressed, sometimes even young people. And so there's always that sense, is there not, Jonathan, that if you introduce the legislation in a robust, well-meaning way initially, it could be relaxed down the line and become something of a monster?
No, I don't think so. I would be worried if that was the case, but it really honestly isn't. And I'll tell you why. Because in Canada, it's a totally different legal system. Because what happened is, yes, Parliament in there passed this strict law, but the courts overruled it. Now here, the courts cannot do so. All they can do is to pass a recommendation to Parliament, who can then accept or reject it. So the control, it will still be with Parliament. This is British MPs and a British Parliament. So let's do it the British way. And you've got the example of Oregon, which I think you know, because we've discussed this, has been having this system for 25 years, almost exactly the same, and it's worked. And nobody has asked for it to be repealed, not the doctors, not the medics, not the palliative care group, because they actually work very harmoniously. They were opposed initially, I have to admit that, but once it came into force, they worked with it, and now it's actually rather nice in the way that some people who are coming to the end of their life have palliative care first, but when even that can't help, then they transition to assisted dying. So it works elsewhere. There's no reason why it can't work here. And of course, the only reason why I and Kim Ledbetter and so many millions of people want it is because the current system is broken. There are too many people dying every day. I'm sure some of your viewers will know that from their personal experience of family and friends. If everything was great, we wouldn't be asking for it. It's precisely because I think the figure is 17 people die in agony a day. That's 70 today, 24 tomorrow, 68 by the end of the week. We've got to stop it. We've got to offer people options. That's what it's all about, giving people options of how to choose to die.
Do you think there's a conversation to be had about the fact we are ageing as a population? More and more of us are living for a longer time, particularly with end-of-term illnesses such as Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, the rest of it. Could there be a situation where people see that they're degenerating, they don't want to spend all their life savings on care, and so they want to end their lives for inheritance purposes? Could it not be abused along those kind of lines?
I think that is so theoretical. You know, as the Minister of Religion who goes around hospices and hospitals, the thing that strikes you most is just how strong the life force is. Most people don't want to die. This is only for people who are suffering, who are in agony. Or like the lady I visited, I may have told you about her, who said to me, every night I pray that I won't wake up, and every morning I'm disappointed. People who only want to die if they are in excruciating pain. Otherwise, they will carry on for the last minute. And again, we can look at Oregon, because 30%, 1 in 3 people who get the permission for an assisted death then decide not to take it. It's almost like having an emotional safety net. It's there if things go really horribly wrong, but I'm not going to do it because the life force is what keeps us going. I wouldn't be standing here talking to you right now if I didn't think it was right for, not for everybody, but for those people who want. And again, it's that word, options. And the other big word I would say is the C word, compassion. You know, it's not good enough for me or clergy or anybody else to say somebody else has got to suffer because of my ideology.
OK, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much for your compassion. Dr. Jonathan Romain, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Now, as Donald Trump looks set to drop funding for the Ukraine war and order the European Union nations to cough up more cash for NATO, is the EU army planning to secretly expand? The Brexit guard dog, Ben Habib, joins me next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
What about train Wi-Fi? The Times. It's so funny the Times did this story because I was on the train yesterday trying to do some work and connecting to the Wi-Fi, and it happens all the time. It just doesn't work. It's pathetic. And then I open the Times and they've done a massive investigation. Loads of different rail routes from north to south.
Was that the James Bond thing, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I think, well, that passenger got through, or almost got through, one episode one James Bond movie in 8 hours.
But you know, it's interesting. We call it train Wi-Fi, but it isn't. It's just really a SIM card on a train, really. So if your own phone's not going to get signal, why would we assume that the train's going to have signal? It just doesn't work like that. Unless you're in Japan or South Korea, whose infrastructure is infinitely better than ours, you're just not going to get signal. You have to download those films way before you get on
There is technology that can help with that. You know, there really is. If they found ways to put it underground, they can get it on ground and get you going. I definitely think, you know, with the price that we're paying for these tickets, they can get the Wi-Fi going. There is technology.
That's why it's so frustrating, isn't
Call
it?
Elon, get a Starlink, let's go.
If you're a passenger paying hundreds of pounds for a season ticket or whatever you call it, and, you know, commute to work every single day, and you're paying all this money, and you can't
so expensive.
Wi-Fi.
You'd expect Wi-Fi at the basic. Yeah, exactly.
But it happens with phone signal as well. I'll be walking down London in Park Lane or somewhere else, or down on the south coast. I just don't have phone signal, and I think to myself, what on earth is going on?
Doesn't it feel like 5G's made it worse, though?
Yeah.
Because I feel like 4G, that didn't happen so much, but 5G just feels like...
Yeah, and then I always get this little E in the top corner of my phone, and I don't get any signal. I think it's got worse over the past couple of years. Yeah, especially with 5G. I agree with that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 10 to 4. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, get ready for this, because Brussels is changing its spending policies to potentially redirect tens of billions of euros to defence and security. As Donald Trump, that man, looks set to stop funding the Ukraine war. Well, joining me now in the studio is the man I call the Brexit guard dog and the former deputy leader of Reform UK, and, of course, a Brexit Party MEP, my colleague and friend, Ben Habib. Ben, let's go back to 2015 when Nick Clegg said the European army is a dangerous fantasy. It wasn't a dangerous fantasy. You and I were sat there in 2019, in July, Ursula von der Leyen making her pitch to be president. She said a European army would unite the continent, and she was deliberately pitching it as a kind of cut-price NATO for the European Union. Now, you see in this astonishing report, and it shows they're on manoeuvres.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's vintage European Union this morning. Trump threatens to remove the American protective blanket from Europe unless European states, as opposed to Brussels, put their hands in their pockets and stump up for their own defence as part of their NATO commitments. 2% of GDP should go on defence spending. And the EU jumps on that bandwagon. And this isn't about Germany, France, Italy, Netherlands and all of them building up their own independent defences. This is Brussels jumping on that bandwagon and taking control of European defence, what it calls the European Defence Union. And it's been emerging for a long, long time, and it's been widely signalled, and no one in the West seems to have woken up to it. And, by the way, and this is the critical thing from the United Kingdom's perspective, we are being dragged into it. We're already part of it as a result of the deal that Boris Johnson did when we left the EU. People don't know that. People at home, wake up. Boris Johnson signed us into the European Defence Fund.
And we're still in that, even though we've Brexited.
And we're still in, even though we Brexited, which is the development of EU weaponry so that the EU can operate on an interoperable basis under the direction of Brussels. And this is another major step in that direction.
And the key detail here, this is a huge sum of money. 392 billion euros is the regional development pot. I was on the Regional Development Committee when I was an MEP, and this money is given to member states as a way of ensnaring them to build infrastructure, because if they ever leave, they've got to pay it back. And now, Ben Habib, they want to change the rules. So this, rather than just being spent on things like airports, railways, roadways, to aid the manoeuvres of military equipment and personnel around the continent, they want to change it so they can actually build armament factories and ammunition factories in the EU.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, the cohesion funds, the structural funds as they call them, was in order to level up. It was the European equivalent of Boris Johnson's levelling up, which never happened in this country. But they have spent billions and billions and billions on road infrastructure, railway systems, 4G, 5G and all the rest of it in Central and Eastern Europe. And now they're diverting those cohesion funds away from civilian projects to military projects in order to advance rapidly the development of an EU army. And people, Remainers and rejoiners, will be looking at this going, oh, you're just ringing alarm bells. They already have a 10,000-strong Frontex border force, which is badged with EU badges. They don't have Spanish... NATO, when we go and fight with NATO, we still wear our British badges. This is an EU army. And the thing I just want to emphasise again is that the United Kingdom is joining up to this. Starmer is taking us into it. When he talks about intelligence cooperation with the European Union, he's talking about our intelligence being in their infrastructure. When he talks about military cooperation, he's talking about our military being captured by them. This is the United Kingdom giving up its independent defence. And anyone watching this programme saying Ben's being alarmist, I'm not being alarmist. Go and read what's going on. This is precisely what it says. And the European Defence Fund, just going back to the Boris Johnson deal, it says in big, bold letters at the top of the document that articulates what it is, that this is for the advancement of EU political aims.
OK, Ben Habib, we have to leave it there. Debbie Adjuwita-B's got a quick statement. The Finance Minister of Estonia has said this: we're under stronger pressure than others. We need more military presence. Our defence expenditure is high. The next European budget should take that into account. So basically, they think they need to spend up to stay afloat. Ben Habib, superb. Now, first Welby, and now another high priest of woke. He's on his way out. Gary Lineker is to step down as the match of the day pundit. I'll be joined by his buddy, Mark Lawrenson. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, here's your weather.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a fine day for most of us out there, but there is some fog remaining in places and there'll be further fog continuing overnight. Also some frost under this area of high pressure, which is keeping the weather settled at the moment, and it's a clearer area of high pressure compared with last week. And that means less low cloud, although there is still some patchy cloud, especially for East Anglia and the southeast overnight. Some showers running into Kent, along with a brisk breeze. At the other end of the country, northwest Scotland, prone to thickening cloud and some drizzle overnight. That keeps it mild, but in between, a slice of clear sky and some frost and fog to wake up to first thing Wednesday. So for northwest Scotland, it's a milder start to the day with cloud and drizzle coming in from the northwest. And that's going to slowly spread its way southeastwards through the day. But it's bright enough for Aberdeenshire into the Grampians first thing. Northern Ireland, a fairly mixed bag in the morning with a lot of cloud cover, some mist and fog patches. Wales, plenty of bright weather. That's also extending into parts of the Midlands and Northern England, although some fog and frost will be about first thing. Fog and frost free in the southeast, where we've got some cloud and some showers early on, but actually the showers largely disappear by the afternoon as the wind direction changes. Meanwhile, cloud spreads across much of Scotland, avoiding the east but also spilling into Northern Ireland, and it'll be a milder day in the northwest with highs of 12 or 13 Celsius. Plenty of bright weather further south though, and we end the afternoon with some sunny spells for the south and southeast after a relatively cloudy start. Nevertheless, it does turn cloudy fairly widely on Wednesday night, and into Thursday we keep that cloud cover, so a milder start to the day, but then it turns colder during Friday and Saturday from the north.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. There's a shed load causing some delays on the northbound M6 from the M55, junction 32 up to Garstang 33, a lane closure in place. The North Circular, Chingford in London, now the westbound side by the Cooks Ferry interchange, still blocked by queues back towards Waterworks Corner, back towards Walthamstow at the scene there of a collision. The clockwise M25, now the exit slip coming off at St Albans 21A, part blocked and slow. There's been a bump there. There's one as well, anti-clock, just around junction 27 for the M11. That's slow. The exit slip there is currently partially blocked too. And the Colchester bypass, the southbound A12, junction 28 towards the Avenue of Remembrance roundabout at 27. A lane shutting queues back to 29 there at the scene of an accident.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
There's only...
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting, of course, live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, finally fell on his sword today after the child sex abuse scandal he was accused of ignoring simply became too big to ignore. Riddled with scandal, yet consumed by woke, moralising politics. What next for the embattled Church of England? And last night, a former aide to Tony Blair told Patrick Christie's on GB News that Labour should do to the farmers what Margaret Thatcher did to the miners. We'll be talking to farmers across the country to hear what they make of all those comments. And Donald Trump declared war on illegal immigration in his presidential campaign, and today he's hired Tom Homan as his border czar, a former Border Patrol cop. Homan, look at him. He's renowned as one of America's baddest politicians and has warned millions of illegal aliens to start packing. We'll have the full story on the guy they're calling the Darth Vader of woke. And first Welby, and now another high priest of woke, is on his way out too, as Gary Lineker is set to step down from his £1.3 million match of the day gig. Who should replace him? Well, I'll be joined by his former match of the day buddy, Mark Lawrenson. The show, always a pleasure to have your company. Well, Justin Welby has finally fallen on his sword, but why did it take so long? Church of England has been mired in this scandal, the sex abuse scandal, which Mr Welby allegedly knew about back in 2013. Now, the abuser, John Smythe, he died in 2018. In those crucial 5 years, a case could have been made against this QC who abused up to 130 boys. They could have got justice. They could have got resolution. That was denied for them. And today, the buck stopped with Justin Welby. Can the church be saved, or is it at a moral precipice? They lecture us on everything from Brexit, climate change, immigration, and yet they seem to have an attitude that's the very definition of holier than thou. Get in touch, gbnews.com/your say. But now it's your headlines, and here's Sophie Ripper.
Thank you, Martin. It's 2 minutes past 4 and these are your latest headlines. The Archbishop of Canterbury has resigned following a damning report into a prolific child abuser associated with the Church of England. The report concluded that Justin Welby had failed to act after learning about the abuse by John Smythe QC in 2013. In a statement, Welby said the following: "Having sought the gracious permission of His Majesty the King, I have decided to resign as Archbishop of Canterbury. The Makin Review has exposed the long-maintained conspiracy of silence about the heinous abuses of John Smythe. When I was informed in 2013 and told that police had been notified, I believed wrongly that an appropriate resolution would follow. It's very clear that I must take personal and institutional responsibility for the long and re-traumatising period between 2013 and 2024. A man has been arrested following reports of a person carrying knives outside the Houses of Parliament. The Metropolitan Police has said that their officers attended and a 34-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of possession of an offensive weapon in a public place. The area was cordoned off during the incident and the entrance was closed. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has distanced himself from comments made by former Labour advisor John McTernan, who said Britain doesn't need small farmers. When asked about the comments at today's COP29 Q&A, Starmer said he was absolutely committed to supporting our farmers. However, this statement has been seen as controversial following the budget last month, in which Labour introduced a tax of 20% on inherited farming assets above £1 million. Earlier, a sheep and cattle farmer told GB News this tax will devastate many family businesses.
Everybody agrees that in a sound democracy we need to pay taxes because we understand that public sector needs supporting. But I think that the critical thing the government has completely missed on this is that there is no margin left in farming, in British farming. We're constantly told as farmers that we need high welfare livestock systems, we need high regard for the environment, and we're achieving all those things if you look at a global level. But there is still no margin to pay surplus towards taxes, particularly this sort of draconian inheritance tax, which will, frankly, finish off many, many family businesses.
Terminally ill adults who are expected to die within 6 months would be able to request assistance to end their own life under the proposed end-of-life bill. But someone with a disability or mental health issue would not be eligible. The controversial bill has raised some concerns that people could feel pressured into ending their lives prematurely. MPs will have their first vote on the proposals on the 29th of November. A once-a-day pill that could help tens of thousands of people give up cigarettes and prevent thousands of smoking-related deaths each year will be rolled out on the NHS. The pill works by tackling nicotine cravings and also helps with withdrawal symptoms such as irritability and trouble sleeping. Official estimates say it could help more than 85,000 people give up smoking over the coming 5 years, as well as prevent up to 9,500 smoking-related deaths. Boris Johnson has told GB News that Sir Keir Starmer is not doing enough to stop foreign criminals in the UK. The former PM says it's time to review the ECHR and says the Rwanda plan would have worked. It comes as the number of migrants crossing the English Channel in small boats is likely to hit 40,000 by the end of the year. That's according to maritime security sources. Almost 33,000 have already made the illegal journey so far this year. Here's what former PM Boris Johnson had to say on GB News last night.
And I really believe that would have been a huge deterrent to illegal migration. It would have been a huge deterrent. It might be time to review the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights, because I think sometimes it is being applied in a way that is anti-democratic and that is stopping the removal of people who plainly need to be removed.
And finally, Gary Lineker will step down as host of Match of the Day at the end of the current season. The 63-year-old former England striker has presented Match of the Day since 1999, but now Mark Chapman, Gabby Logan and Alex Scott are the current frontrunners to replace the former England star. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophie Reaper. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophie. Now, the big breaking story this afternoon. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, has dramatically resigned from his post. He was under increasing pressure after a report criticised his handling of the allegations against John Smythe QC, who sexually abused hundreds of children in the 1970s and the 1980s. In a statement issued earlier today, Justin Welby has said the following: "It is very clear that I must take personal and institutional responsibility for the long and re-traumatising period between 2013 and 2024. I believe that stepping aside is in the best interests of the Church of England, which I dearly love and which I have been honoured to serve. I pray that this decision points us back towards the love that Jesus Christ has for every one of us." And let's now head over to Lambeth Palace and speak to GB News' correspondent Olivia Utley. Olivia, so there was a growing sense that this was an inevitability, and this afternoon, finally, Justin Welby has stepped down. Tell us more.
Well, yes, it did feel in the end as though Justin Welby was pushed rather than jumped. 5 days ago, the Archbishop of Canterbury was saying that he had seriously considered resignation but had decided not to stand down. He still believed then that his position was tenable. It became clear, however, this morning that he was wrong about that. A number of John Smythe's victims, along with 3 members of the Synod and the Bishop of Newcastle, all said that the Archbishop of Canterbury should resign, along with various parish priests from across the country. Just a little recap over what the Archbishop of Canterbury was accused of. John Smythe was a lay preacher running Christian camps in the 1970s and 80s in Zimbabwe. He was found to have abused about 130 children, really horrific physical abuse of these children. That fact was alerted to Justin Welby in 1981. A sort of cryptic comment was made by another priest in 1981. Welby ignored that, which perhaps was forgivable, but then in 2013, when the true extent of John Smythe's abuse was published in a report, Justin Welby did not investigate properly. He didn't make sure that the issue was handed over to the police. Welby says that he was told that the issue had been handed over to the police, but he didn't check up on that and he didn't see it through. The result of that was that John Smythe died in 2018 while Hampshire police were still investigating his crimes, so his victims were never able to see him come to justice. Welby managed to hold off criticism over this until the last few days, but today it just became untenable. His resignation really does leave the Church of England in a lot of hot water.
Thank you very much. That's Olivia Utley live from Lambeth Palace. Now, for more reaction, I'm now joined by the journalist and the writer Emma Webb. Emma, welcome to the show. Now, I know as a Christian this will be very, very upsetting for you, and yet at the same time, of course, we have a problem with the entire, seems to be the morality of the Church of England. How can we have an institution that turns a blind eye or protects its own in circumstances like this, and yet the holier-than-thou attitude everywhere else is to admonish the rest of us for our position on immigration or Brexit or racism or climate change or vaccines. They had an opinion on everything, and yet they seem to keep the darkest secrets about their own. What next for the Church?
Well, I'm certainly not sad to see the back of Justin Welby. In fact, I've been repeatedly calling for him to resign over all sorts of issues because, just frankly, his leadership of the Church of England has been a disaster. He's run the Church into the ground in so many different ways. I mean, you mentioned some of the examples there of how politicised the Church of England has become under his leadership. And I think one of the issues with this is that, as others have pointed out, this smacks of hypocrisy. He made it his cause to champion safeguarding within the church and held a number of other members of the clergy to account for their lack of proper action over things that were not as big as this scandal, just simply because this is has been dubbed the biggest scandal of its kind within the Church of England. The fact that, as Olivia mentioned there, he'd been given some kind of cryptic tip-off in the 1980s that he'd worked in this guy's camps summer camps on the dormitories, that he'd exchanged Christmas cards with this man, even if he says that he wasn't his friend. And the fact that, you know, in a previous interview, he claimed he knew nothing about it. He knew about this obviously in 2013, which is over 10 years ago, and decided not to champion justice for those victims. So I think many people think that this is extremely hypocritical of him. I think whoever had given him previous advice that he didn't need to resign, I think the fact that he thought that he could stay shows serious issues with his own moral judgment and leadership within the church. Obviously, I presume the king has given him some very good advice that has led to this resignation. But fundamentally, you know, the Church of England is part of the constitutional framework of this country. It is fundamental to this country. And he's run the church into the ground. So I'm very glad to see the back of him. And it's absolutely the right thing that he's resigned. I only hope that he's replaced by somebody who can provide the leadership that the church needs, although I'm not holding my breath.
Emma, do you think another problem the Church of England has is this mindset, this liberal, metropolitan, very politicised mindset is completely divorced from the vast majority of the Church of England's flock?
Well, absolutely. There is a gulf between congregations and those in leadership positions in the church. And we know that Justin Welby was brought in as a kind of managerial type, having worked previously in oil. He's been running the Church of England like some kind of woke corporation, constantly dragging it into culture war scandals with the sorts of statements that he makes. And at the same time, we've seen dwindling numbers in the Church of England. I mean, the way the church responded over COVID by closing its doors at a time when the church was needed by the people of this country the most. It's actually those churches that opened their doors as early as possible that have been thriving since COVID. I think that it shows the leadership of the Church of England has really become, you know, not just Justin Welby, but a number of other bishops who I won't name. I've criticised them all many times before. But there's a whole roster of bishops who are completely divorced from the views not just of this country, but of your average Church of England congregant. The Church of England used to be jokingly referred to as the Conservative Party at prayer, but it's now something more like Extinction Rebellion at prayer. And that is doing absolutely no good for the spiritual welfare of this country.
OK, Emma Webb, thanks for your insight. We have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us today on GB News. Now, how would you like to win your entire Christmas this year? Well, here at GB News, we're giving you the chance to do just that with the very latest festive bumper edition of the Great British Giveaway. And here's the details that you need to try and win.
You could win Christmas on us.
And the very best of luck. And we'll be crossing to Exmoor shortly to hear more about the plight of British farming following the latest changes, of course, to inheritance tax. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
It seems that the younger generation's interest in literature is waning. Academics argue that educational policies have failed to encourage reading for pleasure, contributing to declining numbers of English literature students and a shift towards young adult books rather than classic novels. According to 2023 figures from the National Literacy Trust, the number of 8 to 18-year-olds who say they enjoy reading has sunk to its lowest level for almost 20 years, with a quarter fewer reading each day over that same time period. To share more with us about this topic, I'm joined now by the journalist Charlotte Lytton. Charlotte, welcome back. Lovely to talk to you again. Tell us your perspective on this issue. What is happening?
Well, speaking to academics, we can't deny, it seems, that there is a big problem here, and it starts right at school. As you read there, young children simply don't enjoy reading for pleasure as they did before. We can't deny that is also a massive part because of smartphones, because kids now are faced with all of these things vying for their attention. They just don't have to sit down and entertain themselves with a long book and nothing else as they did before. as we see from those figures with people going to study humanities at university, the decline is just going all the way because people simply are not interested in reading for pleasure as they were.
Do you get any feeling that education policy or that teachers are taking steps to counter this?
Well, there is a review of the curriculum going ahead right now, but school is a huge part of it. One of the things that has come up in this conversation is whether teachers now are dealing with crowd control, which means they can't simply encourage reading for pleasure because they're simply trying to get a hold of the students they have.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:20. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, it's Farmageddon. Now, in an interview with GB News last night, the former Labour Party advisor John McTernan had this to say.
You would do to farmers what Margaret Thatcher did to miners, which was, she used very heavy-handed police tactics, followed by what? Putting them out of business.
If people are so upset that they want to go on the streets and spray slurry on them, then we don't need the small farmers.
Well, as a miner's son, John, that is not on. And earlier on, our political editor, Christopher Hope, asked Sir Keir Starmer about those comments.
On inheritance tax plans for farmers, John McTernan, a former aide to Tony Blair, of course, the Labour Prime Minister, says your party wants to do to the farmers what Thatcher did to the miners. It's an industry we can do without. Is that what you think about farming?
No, I totally disagree. I'm absolutely committed to supporting our farmers. I said that before the election, and I say it after the election. That is why in our budget last week, I was very pleased that we're investing £5 billion of our budget over the next 2 years into farming. That is really important for our farmers, and I will do everything I can to support them, because I think it's essential that they not only prosper, but prosper well into the future. So I totally disagree with those comments.
Well, the Labour Party once again up to their necks in it of farmers' slurry. And talking of which, let's cross live now to GB News' Emily Carver, who is at a farm on Exmoor in North Devon this afternoon. Emily, how's your day been down on Tit Farm?
Thank you very much, Martin. Yes, Keir Starmer says he's doing everything he can to support farms, but is he? The farmers here certainly don't think he is. They see these tax changes as an attack on the very existence of family farms up and down the country. I've been on this particular farm, Fernham Farm in Exmoor, as you say, in North Devon, from 5:30 in the morning to see what a day in the life is like on the farm. And let me tell you, it's a lot more graft than working in Westminster. And I'm going to go speak to James Wright, who is the owner of this particular farm, because James has been putting me through my paces all day. We've done some sheep herding, we've released the hens, we've picked up some laid eggs and made some breakfast with them. We've also been feeding the pregnant cows, which is a very important thing to do this time of year. But James, what have you got for me now?
Well, we need to go and put the cows back so then we can clean up their bed and then they can go to sleep.
Oh, well, fantastic. Should we get on with it?
We should.
Come on then. Let the camera follow us. Right, OK, so they need to go to bed, do they?
Yeah, we should close that gate behind you.
It's time for their bedtime. Right, OK, so you're doing your thing. How can I help?
Stand there.
Just signal. Can you see me? Yes? Oh gosh, I think I'm in a big pile of poo. I'm in a big pile of poo. I'll be taking that back to London.
And keeping out a kicking range is probably not a bad idea as well.
But what I've noticed, I mean, James, while we're doing this, we can walk and chat. We can move the cows. There we go. We can move the cows and talk at the same time. But just what exactly from this day? We've spoken to not only yourself, we've spoken to a farmer called Robin, we've spoken to a farmer called Ollie, and what they don't seem to understand, and also what you as well, is why the government are making these changes, firstly, so all of a sudden, so suddenly, without putting it in the manifesto, without telling you in advance. How on earth are you supposed to plan for the future?
Yeah, I mean, you heard from Robin earlier, you know, he's coming to the end of his farming career and he's already put plans in place. Have to change, and there'll be many farmers at the moment looking down that barrel. And the really sad thing about the policy, 6th of March 2026, you won't pay any tax. If you die one day later, you will. So there'll be a cliff edge. It's a really badly designed policy. It's very vindictive. That's what it is.
Yeah, very vindictive. That's quite a strong message that we've been hearing all day. You're going to be one of the farmers who heads down to London, to our capital city, to make your voice heard. What are you going to be saying?
Look, change the tax, repeal it or change it, make it fair. Family farms are what protects the nation's food security. And without...
And just finally, to leave a high note, what's the best?
It's just got to be the unpredictability. Every day is different. I mean, as you see,
I've seen it's all been unpredictable. We're so dependent on the weather, so dependent on costs, energy costs, everything else, the regulations. The last thing family farms need is to be slapped with yet more tax. Well, thank you very much indeed, James, for bringing me along your journey today at the farm. We've had an absolute great time, and I hope our viewers and listeners have learned something and appreciate just how difficult it is sometimes to manage a family farm. Back to you, Martin.
Wonderful stuff, Emily Calmer, really mucking in there with the farmers. The cameraman in particular deserves a pat on the head. Whoops, there I go again. Now, let's get the very latest from our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis. He has been spending the day at a livestock market in my old neck of the woods, Melton Mowbray, the home of the pork pie.
Mowbray is often called the rural capital of food. Think Stilton cheese and the Melton Mowbray pork pie, but it's also home to a 1,000-year-old cattle market, and here today 4,000 or so sheep have been up for auction, and as you can see in the background, the final few auctions are ongoing. One of the conversations that is ripe in a place like this is about the future of family farms if there is an introduction of inheritance tax. Until now, family farms and farmers have been exempt from paying inheritance tax, but the agricultural property relief, which is going to be introduced after Rachel Reeves' budget from a couple of weeks ago, means that now any farms that are worth over £1 million, those assets will be taxed 20% on anything worth that £1 million. I've been speaking to one farmer, Ollie Lee, about his thoughts on what this might mean for family farms like his.
Everybody agrees that in a sound democracy we need to pay taxes because we understand that public sector needs supporting. But I think that the critical thing the government has completely missed on this is that there is no margin left in farming, in British farming. We're constantly told as farmers that we need high welfare livestock systems, we need high regard for the environment, and we're achieving all those things if you look at a global level. But there is still no margin to pay surplus towards taxes, particularly this sort of draconian inheritance tax, which will, frankly, finish off many family businesses.
Well, many farmers across the country are really worried about what inheritance tax might mean for their future, and some of them feel that they simply won't be able to carry on or even pass down farms when people pass on and children or family hope to take it on. But the government, led by Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, in the budget that came out a couple of weeks ago, insists that they need to raise the tax to raise £1.8 billion, which will be used towards funding public services like the NHS.
And that's Will Hollis in Melton Mowbray. And joining me now is the Professor of Economics and Public Policy at King's College, Professor Jonathan Portes. Welcome to the show, Jonathan. So can we get your take on the numbers of farmers who are going to be impacted by this? The Labour Party claim it's only around about 23 to 24% of farmers who will be hit by this £1 million hike. But farmers I've spoken to and the National Farmers of Union, they say it's more like 2/3 of farmers. Tell me the truth.
Well, the truth is the NFU has got it wrong. They're looking at farms rather than farmers, and of course, or people who own farms, and quite a lot of people, it turns out, own more than one farm. So if we look at the statistics, in the most recent statistics that we can look at, about 2/3 of this relief, 2/3 of the value of the tax that Rachel Reeves is trying to raise, went to about 200 estates a year, 200 people dying a year, each of whom claimed more than £1 million, with an average value of about £6 million. And moreover, about half of the people who actually got this tax break, remember it's a tax break, it's not a special tax on farmers, they're just not getting as big a tax break as they used to compared to the rest of us. Less than half of the people who claimed this relief were actually farmers. Many of them were landlords. So this is mostly a tax break that goes to rich people. It's on large estates, and it's mostly a tax break that goes to people who aren't even directly engaged in farming. Of course, there are always going to be hard cases. There are hard cases in almost any tax policy. And frankly, in all the tax and benefit policies that I've ever had anything to do with, there are people who are a lot worse off than the people we're talking about here.
But, Jonathan, I spoke to numerous farmers who say £1 million is easily breached simply with the buildings, with the equipment, with the livestock, let alone the land. And it's a tax break specifically to ensure the farms aren't broken up and they can stay in family ownership to provide food sovereignty for the nation. It's not the same as dodging inheritance tax. Farmers are special people who surely deserve our protection.
And farmers do indeed get a lot of protection. Remember, farmers get huge subsidies that almost no other, they're far more subsidized than any other industry, right? So,
most of them make a pittance.
As I said, farmers are subsidized more than any other industry. The £5 billion, we used to pay a lot via Europe. Remember that bill we paid to Europe for our so-called membership bill? Most of that went to support farms all over Europe. Now, instead of paying to Europe, we pay our taxes to Westminster, and they send it back to farmers to subsidize farmers here. So we're still subsidizing them in a way which we don't subsidize almost any other industry. Now, what's happening here is that a very generous tax break is being scaled back so that it is no longer, so it is still a pretty generous, but not as generous tax break. So the first £1 million is exempt. After that, you only pay tax of 20%. There's still exemptions for business property relief. There's still exemptions on what you pass on to your spouse. So frankly, the system is still pretty generous to farmers. And remember, when you talk about small family farms, you also, as you will know, Martin, know that we're also talking about people like James Dyson, Jeremy Clarkson, and so on.
But there are a tiny minority of farmers.
Wait a minute.
That's where most of the money. There are tiny minority of farmers. The huge amount of farmers I speak to struggle on less than minimum wages because they're screwed to the floor by suppliers, and now they see this as the cruelest tax of all. But, Jonathan, we have to leave it there. We've simply run out of time and have to get to the news. Professor Jonathan Portes, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
On the show. Now, we've got some breaking news for you now. Keir Starmer respects the decision of the Archbishop of Canterbury to step down. Downing Street has said, Keir Starmer commenting on that resignation of Justin Welby. Keir Starmer respects the decision of the Archbishop of Canterbury to step down, Downing Street has said. And we'll keep bringing you all the latest reaction to Justin Welby's resignation, of course, throughout the show. And now let's move on, and here's your latest news headlines, and it's Sophie Reaper.
Thank you, Martin. It's just after 4:30 and these are your latest GB News headlines. We'll start with some more on that breaking news now. A spokesperson for the Prime Minister has said that Sir Keir respects the decision of the Archbishop of Canterbury to resign. They also added that the PM's thoughts first and foremost remain with all the victims. Justin Welby stepped down earlier today following a damning report into a prolific child abuser associated with the Church of England. The reports concluded that Welby had failed to act after learning about the abuse by John Smythe QC in 2013. In a statement, the outgoing Archbishop said the following: "Having sought the gracious permission of His Majesty the King, I have decided to resign as Archbishop of Canterbury. It is very clear that I must take personal and institutional responsibility for the long and re-traumatising period between 2013 and 2024. The Prime Minister has pledged an 81% cut to UK emissions by 2035 at the UN Climate Summit in Azerbaijan. Sir Keir Starmer says there is what he called a huge opportunity for the UK to lead the world in the economy of tomorrow, which he said would mean better jobs and economic growth in the UK. Here's what the PM had to say earlier on today.
Let me be clear. There is no national security. There is no economic security. There is no global security without climate security. And this is a huge opportunity for investment, for UK businesses, for British workers, if we act now to lead the world in the economy of tomorrow.
Terminally ill adults who are expected to die within 6 months would be able to request assistance to end their own life. That's under the proposed end-of-life bill. But someone with a disability or mental health issue would not be eligible. The controversial bill has raised some concerns that people could feel pressured into ending their lives prematurely. MPs will have their first vote on the proposal on the 29th of November. Queen Camilla will return to public duties today after her chest infection. The Queen is attending the Booker Prize reception at Clarence House later today, but will meet guests for a shorter period than initially planned. She was forced to withdraw from her duties last week and also missed the weekend's Remembrance Day commemoration events. And finally, Gary Lineker will step down as host of Match of the Day. That's at the end of the current season. The 63-year-old former England striker has presented Match of the Day since 1999. But now Mark Chapman, Gabby Logan and Alex Scott are the current frontrunners to replace the former England star. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophie Reaper. More from me in the next half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a fine day for most of us out there, but there is some fog remaining in places and there'll be further fog continuing overnight. Also some frost under this area of high pressure, which is keeping the weather settled at the moment, and it's a clearer area of high pressure compared with last week, and that means less low cloud, although there is still some patchy cloud, especially for East Anglia and the southeast overnight. Some showers running into Kent, along with a brisk breeze. At the other end of the country, northwest Scotland prone to thickening cloud and some drizzle overnight. That keeps it mild, but in between, a slice of clear sky and some frost and fog to wake up to first thing Wednesday. So for northwest Scotland, it's a milder start to the day with cloud and drizzle coming in from the northwest. And that's going to slowly spread its way southeastwards through the day. But it's bright enough for Aberdeenshire into the Grampians first thing. Northern Ireland, a fairly mixed bag in the morning with a lot of cloud cover, some mist and fog patches. Wales, plenty of bright weather. That's also extending into parts of the Midlands and Northern England, although some fog and frost will be about first thing. Fog and frost free in the southeast where we've got some cloud and some showers early on, but actually the showers largely disappear by the afternoon as the wind direction changes. Meanwhile, cloud spreads across much of Scotland, avoiding the east but also spilling into Northern Ireland, and it'll be a milder day in the northwest with highs of 12 or 13 Celsius. Plenty of bright weather further south though, and we end the afternoon with some sunny spells for the south and southeast after a relatively cloudy start. Nevertheless, it does turn cloudy fairly widely on Wednesday night, and into Thursday we keep that cloud cover, so a milder start to the day, but then it turns colder during Friday and Saturday from the north.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. There's a shed load on the northbound M6, still a lane closed from the M55 at 32 up to Garstang at 33. Now in Birmingham, the Aston Expressway, the northbound A38M, 2-lane shut before the M6 at Spaghetti Junction. That, of course, Junction 6, keeping back towards Holloway Circus on the A38 Inner Ring Road at the scene of a collision. Issues for the M4 both ways in Berkshire, breakdowns causing delays. 6 to 5 eastbound, that's Slough to Langley, a lane out. Same story westbound, 8 to 9 Maidenhead towards Wokingham. And if you're heading on the anti-clockwise M25 this afternoon towards and past Lakeside and Purfleet Junction 30, lane 1's coned off at the moment, causing delays this one as a lorry there undergoes a tyre change. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 4:38. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, Donald Trump declared war on illegal immigration in his presidential campaign. And today he's hired Tom Homan as his new border czar. Look at him, a former Border Patrol cop. Homan is renowned as one of America's baddest politicians and has warned millions of illegal aliens to start packing. Well, joining me now is the director of the Leadership Institute, Matthew Hurt. Matthew, welcome to the show. Tom Homan is somebody who's taken great joy in eviscerating Liberals during hearings in the media. Of course, he was Donald Trump's former head of border control in the previous regime. Now he's back, and he seems like the real deal.
Martin, it's great to be with you, and he is absolutely the real deal. He's a career law enforcement professional who served as the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Director under the previous Trump administration, and he's got a great plan. You know, our immigration system in the United States is broken. It's a national security crisis. It is also a humanitarian crisis, and Tom is the kind of guy who's clear-minded, clear-sighted, who can get this problem solved.
Let's have a quick listen to Tom Homan in action now.
How many pounds of fentanyl didn't make it in this country to kill Americans? How many known suspected terrorists didn't make it in the country? How many billions of dollars did the cartels make? President Trump is one badass president. He secured the border at the level we've never seen before. And I got a message to the millions of illegal aliens that's been released into the United States under this administration. Don't get too comfortable. We're going to need some help. Do I have any volunteers that want to come back and help run the biggest deportation operation in the history of this nation?
So Matthew Hurt, there he is in action, talking business with a whooping crowd. Worth pointing out, he was originally hired for the federal government by Barack Obama back in the day. So this guy has worked across various regimes of both political stripes. But he certainly seems to be a man who's talking to the people forthright, and he absolutely destroys people who try and take him down in hearings. He's certainly going to be a huge focal point for the Trump regime.
It's a tremendous opportunity right now in cities across the country in the United States. We've got Venezuelan gangs, other people who have flown underneath the radar. It is so important for a nation to have borders and to understand who is coming into the country. Again, Tom's years of service in law enforcement, particularly as it pertains to immigration, is so important as Donald Trump hits the ground running in January. We will have almost no delay in the Trump administration's ability to enforce our immigration laws here in the United States.
It's worth pointing out that in 2017, between Inauguration Day in that January and at the end of April, he arrested over 41,300 illegal immigrants in the country, in America. That was a 38% year-on-year increase. And what I'm hearing, Matthew, this time around, the Trump regime seems much more organised, much more cohesive, and much more ready to make a dramatic impact from the very, very beginning. So, Matthew Hurt, we could expect even bigger numbers this time around.
National Public Radio in the United States reports that 100,000 deportations could take place in just the first 4 weeks of the Trump administration. And what this will also do is encourage others who have come to the country illegally to what we call self-deport. They will leave on their own. But certainly the administration, the incoming Trump administration, is prepared for day one. Those first 100 days are going to be absolutely critical in advancing Trump's America First agenda.
And, you know, last night I covered for Nigel Farage. We had Mick Mulvaney on. He was the former chief of staff. You smile there. You know Mick. And he said something which I found so interesting. He said the people who loved Donald Trump first time around are going to love him even more the second time around. And the people who hated Donald Trump the first time around, they're going to hate him even more the second time around, because this is a regime that really, really seems to mean business.
Donald Trump and the learning curve will be almost zero this time. A number of his picks are stellar. We've seen Susie Wiles as the selection of chief of staff. She runs a tight ship, and we're going to see a lot of things happen in the first month or the first 100 days. And you're absolutely right, Martin. People who love Donald Trump and the policies are going to love this next administration, and the leftists who don't like it are on alert.
Well, I'm afraid the nation got the president it voted for. And Matthew, now all of those 7 swing states all came in for Republican-led Donald Trump. It's astonishing to see that the amount of popular votes Donald Trump got is greater than JFK got in 1960. This is one heck of a popular president, despite what the liberal media might say.
Donald Trump saw an increase in support among Hispanic and Latino voters, Asian American voters, even Black and African American voters, broad support across demographics, and he increased his vote share in every single county that he won. This is a mandate to govern. He's returning to Washington with a Republican majority in the Senate and the House of Representatives. So I think we're in a good place. I think Republicans, and in particular conservatives, are in a good place on many of these policies.
Matthew Hurt as well. In his Secretary of State, he's appointed Marco Rubio, the first Latino, the Florida senator. So again, bolstering his support, no doubt, and popularity amongst the Latino community who voted and turned out for Trump because they're also fed up of the porous borders. One thing for sure, it's going to be one heck of a show, one heck of a spectacle, and all eyes will be on America. Thank you very much for your insights and expertise today. That's the director of the Leadership Institute, Matthew Hurt. Thanks for joining us live from USA. Now up next, Gary Lineker has called time on his career hosting Match of the Day. I'll be joined by his former Match of the Day buddy, Mark Lawrenson. That's next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Let's speak now to Charlie Mullins, who's the founder of Pimlico Plumbers, and entrepreneur Oliver Hodgson. Really good to see you both this morning. Charlie, let's start with you. Has working from home and the culture surrounding working from home killed work experience, do you think?
Undoubtedly. Many companies now are not getting youngsters in for the work experience because of the fact they don't have the staff in. So if they're only in 2 days a week, they're not going to get in the youngsters. They've got no one to train them. So it's killed it totally. And if you think it's bad now, probably 4 or 5 years from now, it'll be absolutely ridiculous. This working from home, I said from day one, is going to kill youngsters' futures, youngsters' careers, and getting people into the workplace. So now the damage is showing through, unfortunately. COVID finished a couple of years ago. The working from home should have stopped and get people back into the workplace.
I mean, Oliver, you have to say it's difficult to see how people in a work-from-home environment can do any sort of on-the-job training at all.
It's really interesting, the work experience piece, actually, because we ran an internship program in the summer here. We had 5 people in the office in person and they really thrived, but we did have a couple of people who joined remotely because of their own reasons, right, and where they were. I think it's a bit more nuanced than that as well, because I've got clients who have completely remote teams. Now, I don't. I have an office and our team are based in here, but our clients who do, they're able to offer work experience opportunities digitally with fantastic technology to people across the world, right? So they have people in their team who are working from all sorts of different continents, which is obviously fantastic. But I agree with Charlie, right? You cannot knock in-person engagement. You cannot knock being in the office.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:48. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, after 26 long years of presenting Match of the Day, Gary Lineker will quit the show at the end of this season. Reports have also claimed that his possible replacements have already been written up by top BBC Sport officials, with Mark Chapman, Chappers and Alex Scott currently being considered as the favourites. Well, I'm delighted to say now, joining me to discuss this is the legendary Liverpool footballer and the former Match of the Day pundit, and indeed the colleague of Gary Lineker, Mark Lawrenson. Lawro, welcome to the show. An absolute joy to have your company. Now, many people, Lawro, will look back on your years as the golden years, 97 till 2018, when you and Hansen curmudgeonly grumbled your way through our Saturday nights together. Glorious times. Before we talk about Gary Lineker, can we reflect on how much you enjoyed your time on the legendary show?
Oh, absolutely loved it. But obviously, from what you're saying, people didn't like me curmudgeonly. Whatever. What does that mean? I'm from Preston. Explain.
It means you moaned a lot about football in a way that I understand.
Surely not. Surely not. Oh well, it's gone nuts now, is it? Yeah, no, it was great times with the three of us. People forget that Gary was thrown in because Des Lynam departed to ITV, and they chucked Gary in. And he'll tell you, when he first started, certainly when he was first doing Football Focus and doing the radio, he says he was awful. But once he got into the Match of the Day chair, he's been very, very good. I mean, former player, played at the highest level, knows the game inside out, twinkle in his eye, likes to have a little bit of a laugh and a joke on air as well. And obviously, when the football's serious, the football's serious. So I think he's earned the right to decide when he wants to leave, which obviously is at the end of the season.
And Lawro, do you think that's what's happened here? Has Gary Lineker decided, or has somebody else decided for him? The new director of sport apparently wants to cut costs. He wants to get the wage bill down. Of course, there's been a big public outcry about, is it right for licence payers to pay 1.35 million quid for a bloke to talk about football? What's your take on that?
Well, you like it, don't you? I like it. So, look, it's one of those, isn't it? Yes, there is a new director of football. Maybe he wants to jump in and say, right, this is where we're going to be. I think if you're asking me who do I think should get it, I would say to you Mark Chapman. Mark Chapman does Match of the Day too, so slip into Gary's chair quite easily, I would have thought. Plus, of course, he does Radio 5 all the time. He's very, very talented. But there's a few of the girls about as well, so who knows? But I think the thing with Gary is probably he's just had enough. But I mean, what a run! What an absolute run! How many people stay on the telly for how many years did you say it was, Martin?
26 years, mate. 26 years.
26 years, you'd have been out if you'd committed murder by then, wouldn't you?
Good stuff. Now, do you think then? I mean, a lot of people want Chappers. You know, Chapman. He is the bookies' favourite, and I think he's undoubtedly the fans' favourite. But we do live in a time, Mark Lawrenson, where everything goes through the prism of sexism, of wokeism, of identity politics. Do you think that might impact the decision? Should we have a female presenter, or will that go down badly with the punters?
Well, I don't know. You'd have to ask the punters. But You don't know. It's the BBC, so you've got absolutely no idea. Maybe the director of football is going to do it himself, so he'll get 2 wages. How good would that be? And we'd all love him, wouldn't we? Look, I don't know, but I just feel in Gabby Yoris, another one, very, 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 very good.
Do you think, Laura, it's fair to say that Lineker has come under quite a lot of criticism, especially with people that like to watch GB News, that he kept his politics very much front and centre as well. He banged on about Brexit, he banged on about immigration, all the rest of it. Was that a step too far? Should he have stuck to the footy?
Well, I think he was bored, wasn't he? Because he only works 1 day a week. So we probably thought, I need to keep myself in the news. I was just going to say Kerry Cates as well, who's Kenny Dalglish's daughter. She'll have a good chance because she's very, very good indeed. Look, he's had a great run. Who's to know that he might not be doing something else?
What about you, Laura? How about you dust off your microphone and get back in the big chair?
Listen, I'm ready for the great big bin. Don't worry about that.
Well, Lawrence, an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. A legend, as ever. Thank you very much, Laura, for joining us on GB News this afternoon. Thank you very much. Now, loads of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on Gary Lineker stepping down at gbnews.com/your say. And here's this. Brad says, I'm so glad to see the back of Mr. Lineker. Mark Chapman is the only real choice among those being considered. I boycotted MOTD for the past 5 years, but Chappers could perhaps persuade me. I doubt it, though. I don't think he is woke enough. And Anne says this, I quite liked Gary, even if he was a bit sensitive. But the thing is this, many of you simply say, for God's sake, stick to the football, stay away from Brexit, stay away from Rwanda, stay away from climate change, stop being Greta Thunberg with a microphone, and please just talk about football. That's your pay, crack on with the job. Now, we'll bring you all the latest news on the breaking news story from earlier on this afternoon. And, of course, that is that Justin Welby has dramatically stepped down as the Archbishop of Canterbury. A full reaction on that and ask, what does that mean for the future of the Church of England? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. Now, here's your weather, and here's Aidan McGibbon.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a fine day for most of us out there, but there is some fog remaining in places and there'll be further fog continuing overnight. Also some frost under this area of high pressure, which is keeping the weather settled at the moment, and it's a clearer area of high pressure compared with last week, and that means less low cloud, although there is still some patchy cloud, especially for East Anglia and the southeast overnight. Some showers running into Kent, along with a brisk breeze. At the other end of the country, northwest Scotland prone to thickening cloud and some drizzle overnight. That keeps it mild, but in between, a slice of clear sky and some frost and fog to wake up to first thing Wednesday. So for northwest Scotland, it's a milder start to the day with cloud and drizzle coming in from the northwest, and that's going to slowly spread its way southeastwards through the day. But it's bright enough for Aberdeenshire into the Grampians first thing. Northern Ireland, a fairly mixed bag in the morning with a lot of cloud cover, some mist and fog patches. Wales, plenty of bright weather. That's also extending into parts of the Midlands and Northern England, although some fog and frost will be about first thing. Fog and frost free in the southeast, where we've got some cloud and some showers early on, but actually the showers largely disappear by the afternoon as the wind direction changes. Meanwhile, cloud spreads across much of Scotland, avoiding the east, but also spilling into Northern Ireland, and it'll be a milder day in the northwest with highs of 12 or 13 Celsius. Plenty of bright weather further south, though, and we end the afternoon with some sunny spells for the south and southeast after a relatively cloudy start. Nevertheless, it does turn cloudy fairly widely on Wednesday night, and into Thursday we keep that cloud cover, so a milder start to the day, but then it turns colder during Friday and Saturday from the north.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. There's queues in Falkirk on the northbound side of the M876 this afternoon. From the M9 at 7 Kinnaird House up towards the Bowtrees interchange at 3, there's a breakdown blocking a lane, causing delays. Now, 2 lanes shut on the eastbound M62, 11 to 12 Birchwood to Eccles. 2 lanes coned off there at the scene of a collision. Now, Birmingham, the outbound side of the Aston Expressway, the A38M really struggling. 2 lanes are out from the Park Circus junction towards Spaghetti Junction. That's junction 6 of the M6. Now, a collision there being recovered, causing queues back to Dartmouth Circus. Northbound M1, exit Slip Road closed at the Newport Pagnell services. A vehicle fire causing delays. And Blackwall in London at the East India Dock Road Tunnel, heading out of town. Aspen Way, a lane shut, causing queues.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
On demand. Good luck.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe. Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting live to the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, finally fell on his sword today after the child sex abuse scandal he was accused of ignoring simply became too big to ignore. Riddled with scandal, yet consumed by woke, moralising politics, what next for the embattled Church of England? And last night, a former aide to Tony Blair told Patrick Christys on GB News that Labour should do to the farmers what Thatcher did to the coal miners. We'll be talking to farmers across the country to hear what they make of this latest scandal. And Chagos Islanders fly to London today to protest the government's agreement to give their territory to Mauritius. But is it enough for Keir Starmer to change his mind? We'll be live from the demonstration in East London in Hackney. That's all coming in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. Now, here's one for you. Does your school allow children of different faiths to opt out of Christmas plays or nativity? They do at my kids' school, and one school's found themselves at the heart of a scandal today, an unholy Yuletide scandal, because they're basically removing any reference to Christmas from their school pantomime. It's Jack and the Beanstalk, in case it offends those of a different religious persuasion. It's meant to be more inclusive by banning references to Christmas. Has the world gone mad? Are we losing sight of our Christian values? And talking of which, we'll be looking at the Justin Welby scandal. The Archbishop of Canterbury forced to resign after the sex abuse scandal simply became too big. Is the church totally losing its way? Has it turned its back on its flock? Is it consumed with woke politics? Should it just get back to basics? Get in touch. This is your show. gbnews.com/your say is the way to do it. Now, here's your headlines, and it's Sophie Reaper.
Thank you, Martin. The time is just after 5 o'clock. Now let's take a look at your latest GB News headlines. A spokesperson for the Prime Minister has said that Sir Keir respects the decision of the Archbishop of Canterbury to resign. They also added that the PM's thoughts are first and foremost remaining with all of the victims. Justin Welby has stepped down following a damning report into a prolific child abuser associated with the Church of England. The reports concluded that Welby had failed to act after learning about the abuse by John Smythe QC in 2013. In a statement, the outgoing Archbishop said the following: "Having sought the gracious permission of His Majesty the King, I've decided to resign as Archbishop of Canterbury. It's very clear that I must take personal and institutional responsibility for the long and re-traumatising period between 2013 and 2024. Elsewhere, the Prime Minister has also distanced himself from comments made by former Labour advisor John McTernan, who said Britain doesn't need small farmers. When asked about the comments at today's COP29 Q&A, Starmer said he was absolutely committed to supporting our farmers. However, this statement has been seen as controversial following the budget last month, in which Labour introduced a tax on 20% on inherited farming assets above £1 million. Earlier, a sheep and cattle farmer told GB News this tax will devastate many family businesses.
Everybody agrees that in a sound democracy we need to pay taxes because we understand that public sector needs supporting. But I think that the critical thing the government has completely missed on this is that there is no margin left in farming, in British farming. We're constantly told as farmers that we need high welfare livestock systems, we need high regard for the environment, and we're achieving all those things if you look at a global level. But there is still no margin to pay surplus towards taxes, particularly this sort of draconian inheritance tax, which will, frankly, finish off many, many family businesses.
Earlier today, the Prime Minister pledged an 81% cut to UK emissions by 2035. That was speaking at the UN Climate Summit in Azerbaijan. Sir Keir Starmer says there is what he called a huge opportunity for the UK to lead the world in the economy of tomorrow. He said that would mean better jobs and economic growth in the UK. Here's what the PM had to say earlier on today.
Let me be clear. There is no national security. There is no economic security. There is no global security without climate security. And this is a huge opportunity for investment, for UK businesses, for British workers, if we act now to lead the world in the economy of tomorrow.
A man has been arrested following reports of a person carrying knives outside the Houses of Parliament. The Met Police has said that their officers attended, and a 34-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of possession of an offensive weapon in a public place. The area was cordoned off during the incident, and the entrance was closed. A once-a-day pill that could help tens of thousands of people give up cigarettes and prevent thousands of smoking-related deaths each year will now be rolled out on the NHS. The pill works by tackling nicotine cravings and also helps with withdrawal symptoms such as irritability and trouble sleeping. Official estimates say it could help more than 85,000 people give up smoking over the next 5 years, as well as prevent up to 9,500 smoking-related deaths. And finally, Boris Johnson has told GB News that Sir Keir Starmer is not doing enough to stop foreign criminals in the UK. The former PM says it's time to review the ECHR and says the Rwanda plan would have worked. It comes as the number of migrants crossing the English Channel in small boats is likely to hit 40,000 by the end of the year. That's according to maritime security sources. Almost 33,000 have already made the illegal journey so far this year. Here's what former PM Boris Johnson had to say on GB News last night.
And I really believe that would have been a huge deterrent to illegal migration. It would have been a huge deterrent. It might be time to review the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights, because I think sometimes it is being applied in a way that is anti-democratic and that is stopping the removal of people who plainly need to be removed.
That's all for now from me, but more from me in the next half an hour. But now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sophie. And back now to the breaking news today that Sir Keir Starmer respects the decision of the Archbishop of Canterbury to step down. Downing Street has said Justin Welby was under increasing pressure after a report criticised his handling of the allegations against John Smythe QC, who sexually abused hundreds of children in the 1970s and the 1980s. In a statement, Justin Welby has said this: "It is very clear that I must take personal and institutional responsibility for the long and re-traumatising period between 2013 and 2024. I hope this decision makes clear how seriously the Church of England understands the need for change and our profound commitments to creating a safer church. As I step down, I do so in sorrow with all victims and survivors of abuse." Let's head over now to Lambeth Palace and speak to GB News' correspondent Olivia Utley. Olivia, you've been there throughout the day. The scandal rolled on, the resignation inevitable, and now we have the reaction from the Prime Minister. What's the latest?
Yes, Keir Starmer says that he respects Justin Welby's decision to stand down. Last night, the Prime Minister made a sort of on-the-fence comment. He didn't come down on one side or the other. But this morning, he really toughened up his line and said that although it was a matter for the Church of England to decide, he didn't want to underplay the very serious nature of the allegations against Welby. I think it'll come as quite a relief to Keir Starmer that Welby has decided to resign of his own accord, because there were certainly members of Parliament, including Labour members of Parliament, who very much wanted to see Welby gone and thought that it was Keir Starmer's job to help push him out of the door. I think what's quite interesting about all of this is that this is the first time in UK history that we have had an openly atheist Prime Minister, and it'll be really fascinating to see what Keir Starmer's role, what Parliament's role is, if any, in the appointment of the new Archbishop of Canterbury. The process for appointing a new Archbishop of Canterbury is famously opaque. When George Carey, a C of E spokesman, was asked how it works back in 2012, he said, "I just don't know." But in previous years, Parliament and even Number 10 have had some say over the matter. Will that all change with Keir Starmer in power, given that, as I say, he is the country's first atheist Prime Minister? It'll be really interesting to see how the selection process plays out, particularly because it's such an important time, it's such a difficult time really for the Church of England. MPs are voting at the moment on a bill to scrap hereditary peers, and there is an amendment to that bill which would mean that C of E bishops who currently sit in the House of Lords, if this amendment were passed, would no longer sit in the Lords. So this is a very important, difficult time for the Church of England, and the last thing they wanted was for the Archbishop of Canterbury to have to step down in circumstances like these.
Thank you, Olivia Utley, for reporting there, live from Lambeth Palace on this dramatic day for the Church of England. Now, for more reacting to this, I'm now joined by the lay minister in the Church of England, Martin Whittock. Martin, welcome to the show. So it has to be said, a solemn and perhaps dark day for the Church of England. Can I get your first and initial reaction to the resignation of Justin Welby?
Well, the whole situation is really, really distressing. And the Archbishop really had no choice but to step back, given what's been revealed. Because we're talking here, first of all, about terrible cover-ups of terrible abuse in the 1980s and 1990s. Now, that's not to do with Archbishop Welby, of course, but that's appalling. That's something that the Church repents of and is really putting lots of action into place to make sure it does not happen again. Of course, Welby was not involved in any way with that, but what we are talking about is the complete lack of energy that took place after 2013, kind of assumptions that the police had been informed. And it's that lack of energy, that lack of drive to actually uncover this and really get it sorted out that has forced his resignation today. And I'm the safeguarding officer in my parish church, and I must assure viewers that we take safeguarding really, really seriously. We know of the errors of the past. We know the terrible things that have happened institutionally in the past. Now, within my church, we DBS check everybody who works with children or vulnerable people. We have safer recruiting. We have formats that have to be adhered to. We have policies. We have a safeguarding website. We have safeguarding email. I'm the officer who's responsible for safeguarding. I have another person who I share safeguarding with vulnerable adults. So these historic safeguarding issues, which are absolutely appalling, I must assure people, have driven some major changes in the church over the last 20 years, which is why the lack of energy from the top after 2013 is so distressing, because that's a time when the rest of us were working really, really, really hard to make sure this kind of thing can never happen again. So it really is distressing. But our primary purpose as the church is to communicate the love of God to people with whom we meet. And that means protecting people from abuse, respecting those who've been abused and are victims, and making sure this kind of thing does not happen again, and that we're energetic whenever complaints are made. That is what we're determined to be.
Martin Whittock, I can see and I can hear your passion, and I'm delighted to hear that this is an issue on the ground, on a day-to-day basis. You are taking this work with the legitimacy and the seriousness of which it demands. That's great to hear. However, the head honcho, the Archbishop, turned his back. You could say he neglected his duty. And what about the morality of this? Aren't we in a funny position where Justin Welby, he always liked to portray himself as holier than thou on Brexit, on climate change, on LGBTQ issues, on Black Lives Matter, on Rwanda, you name it. The guy had an opinion where he made the rest of us feel bad about ourselves, and yet, in taking care of the most important part of his own business, his own flock, protecting his flock from abuse, he seemed to turn a blind eye. That casts a shadow, does it not, over the entire institution, the Church of England's ability to be its own moral guardian.
It certainly does. And I think this is the issue. It's the lack of energy, the lack of drive. Clearly, Welby is a good human being. He is a person who loves God and loves people. And yet, when you are the leader of the church, when you are the shepherd of the flock, it requires also drive and energy and grit and the determination to bite the bullet when necessary. And that's why I think so many of us are deeply distressed by this, because we have felt that Justin Welby is a man who loves God, is a man who loves people, but yet we've also needed him to be a man of grit and determination and energy to deal with this kind of thing. And the kind of issues that have emerged of that lack of drive, that lack of energy, not that he was covering up abuse, as it were, in the 80s and 90s, he wasn't involved in that at all, but the fact that when things emerged in 2013, that he didn't drive it home, is that lack of drive, which I think has left many of us flabbergasted.
Yeah, well, it certainly has left many people watching the show flabbergasted, and many attendees of churches. Thanks for joining us, Martin Whittock, and this is the lay minister in the Church of England. Thanks for your time on the show today. Now we're back to Exmoor shortly to hear more about the plight of British farming following the latest changes to inheritance tax as the row rumbles on. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe. Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, her name is synonymous with fashion. Karen Millen, the high street designer whose dresses have been worn by some of the world's most famous women, including the Princess of Wales.
Yes, but in a recent Daily Mail interview conducted by our showbiz juggernaut, as I call her, Steph Tetchy, 63-year-old Karen confessed she isn't immune from worries about her appearance.
Well, this summer, Karen took the plunge with a £35,000 facelift using the very latest surgical techniques. Now, to hear more of her story, we're delighted to be joined by Karen herself and consultant plastic surgeon Dr. Tunç Tiryaki, co-founder of the London Regenerative Institute. So, how did you two get together?
That was a meeting at the Parliament, wasn't it?
It was, actually, yeah, through mutual friends, really.
So you already knew of Tunç and you knew his expertise. How did you come to the decision to kind of go ahead with this. I was reading the Mail article, and apparently one day you looked in the mirror. And I've heard this story so many times before,
Yeah, I know,
from not least my mum and my nan.
Yeah.
And they said they looked in the mirror and thought, goodness me.
I
you
know. I think it's that menopausal thing when suddenly things just change. And yeah, for me, it was coming out of lockdown almost, where I was probably on the back end of menopause, and I just suddenly looked in the mirror and it was like, oh my God, what's happened to me?
Because I guess you still, I mean, for me, I'm 35, I still feel like a 20-year-old or even an 18-year-old. Does that change as you get into sort of your...
Unfortunately not, right?
Well, it does change to a certain extent, but, you know, I've always looked after myself, so I've always kept fit and looked after my skin. So, you know, it did come as a bit of a shock. I mean, I know, obviously, ageing happens to us all and we have to embrace that, but there's a certain amount that we have to put up with, and then, you know, other things can step in.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:18 and I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, a week today, furious farmers are taking to the streets of London, just outside here in Westminster, to protest against Labour's inheritance tax raid on British farms. In an interview with GB News last night, the former Labour Party advisor to Tony Blair, John McTernan, had this to say.
You would do to farmers what Margaret Thatcher did to miners, which was, and you know, she used very heavy-handed police tactics, followed by what? Putting them out of business.
If people are so upset that they want to go on the streets and spray slurry on them, then we don't need the small farmers.
John, as a miner's son, that is not on. Now, earlier, our political editor, Christopher Hope, asked Sir Keir Starmer about those comments.
On inheritance tax plans for farmers, John McTernan, a former aide to Tony Blair, of course, the Labour Prime Minister, says your party wants to do to the farmers what Thatcher did to the miners. It's an industry we can do without. Is that what you think about farming?
No, I totally disagree. I'm absolutely committed to supporting our farmers. I said that before the election, and I say it after the election. That is why in our budget last week I was very pleased that we're investing £5 billion of our budget over the next 2 years into farming. That is really important for our farmers, and I will do everything I can to support them, because I think it's essential that they not only prosper, but prosper well into the future. So I totally disagree with those comments.
Well, that's Sir Keir Starmer once again up to his neck in it with British farmers. And talking of which, here at GB News, we love to muck in with farmers. Let's cross now to Exmoor, where our GB News presenter Emily Carver has been talking to farmers throughout the day.
Shown me quite a bit of his farm now, but now we're at the sheep part of the farm. There are dozens of sheep here. James, thank you very much for taking me to this part of your beautiful farm. I must say the landscape is absolutely stunning. Now, it looks as though the sheep have gone for a walkabout.
Yeah, they have. If we send Tess round, she'll bring them in. Tess, look, away. She'll go, she'll bring them to us.
So she's going to go do her duties, bring the sheep back. But while she's doing that, why don't we have a little chat about how you make money out of these sheep?
Well, I mean, the answer is you don't. You know, farming is not a profitable game. Sorry, one sec, she stopped. Away, Tess, away. Away, Tess, away. And yeah, the very simple matter is you don't make a lot of money out of farming. It needs to be a business. Food needs to be profitable, otherwise people won't make it. But the problem is that there's not a lot of money in it at all.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that people are talking about, making their feelings very loud and clear. Do you feel like the National Farmers Union is doing that for farmers, representing you?
Yeah, I mean, the NFU's got a really tricky job. It's got to keep in with government, but at the same time make sure that farmers are represented. They're not organising the march that's going through London. They've got another event next Tuesday, but a group of farmers have got together and there will be a march, which is great.
And you're going to be taking part. You're going to be down there lobbying the government. Will you bring a tractor?
I won't be bringing a tractor. I'm going to leave the kids and the dog at home as well. But yeah, I think it's really important everyone who goes is on best behaviour, putting the best foot forward for British agriculture, because what the public need to hear is that we love farming, we love our sheep, we love our cows, but farming's got to be profitable, and if the government carry on the way they are, there won't be any family farms left.
And do you hope to pass on your farm to the future generation, to your kids?
Yeah, the problem I've got is I've got 3 boys, all of whom probably will want to farm. But, you know, if the farming is profitable, if we can make it work, then yeah, that is the dream.
And how much of an impact would that 20% death tax have?
Yeah, huge. I mean, we won't make 20% in my lifetime of this value of this farm, and that will just mean that we can't. And you'll stop investing, we'll stop buying machinery, we'll stop buying cows, and the farm will just run into the ground. And what that is bad for, that is bad for the nation's food security.
And how's Tess doing? Oh, wow! Oh, fantastic. There we go. The sheep have done what they're supposed to do. Tess, the dog, has very much done her job. We're going to catch up a little bit later with some more farmers as well from around the surrounding area who all have very different experiences of farming life. They come from different walks of life, but they all have something in common, and that's that they want farming to have a voice with government. Back to you.
Beautiful stuff there. That's Emily Carver down on the farm. Excellent. Didn't that dog do marvellous work? And let's get this back now to the studio. And I'm going to bring in the Deputy President of the Country Land and Business Association, Gavin Lane, who joins me now. Gavin, welcome to the studio. Thanks for joining us. A week today, that protest is taking place. The National Farmers Union are sitting down. They're the Queensberry Rules end of the spectrum. A few more militant farmers, though, aren't at all happy. What do you think is going to happen next Tuesday, and do you think this Labour government is going to listen to British farmers?
I think it will listen. I think the rally and the demo I think are really, really good. I think what we definitely need, though, is for it to be peaceful, for it to be calm, for it to be measured. And I know that we agree with the NFU that we really don't want to see any outbreak of violence or anything approaching that, given the fact that we want to talk and negotiate with the government.
And I have spoken to many farmers on the channel who are very, very frustrated, but they also echo that sentiment.
Good.
If we have scenes like Just Stop Oil, for example, where even a single ambulance is prevented from busy London bridges getting to hospitals around here, then the headlines would be bad. Nevertheless, there is a huge sense of frustration, and the government don't especially seem to be listening. They seem to be standing by their guns on this inheritance tax number. The NFU are clear they want it completely abolished, swept aside, or at least in the very least instance, means tested. Yeah. So those big money farms, the big corporations are targeted, but the small landholders aren't. Do you think there's any wiggle room, or will they just plough the same furrow?
We'd like to see a reverse. We're on the same page as the NFU. I think that's where we need to stand at the moment. They've got to come up with an alternative to this. I think we've, you know, if an alternative exists, if they think that there's something that they can put to the industry, which is an alternative to this. But right at the moment, this is all about the serviceability of this debt, that if this debt happens to land on a family farm, our figures show that it is completely unserviceable. People will not be able to pay for this out of the money that they generate from the farm. They will have to sell land.
And Gavin, what are the numbers? Because every expert, every economist, every government official we ask, we get different numbers. They maintain it's about 27% of farms will be impacted by this £1 million threshold. But farmers we speak to, the NFU, we've spoken to the president, Tom Bradshaw, who said it's far in excess of that. As many as 2/3 of farms could be impacted, because if you add up the machinery in a yard, if you add up the livestock in a yard, the house, before we even get to a patch of land, it can easily nudge over £1 million.
Exactly. I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. We know that around about 70,000 farms we think will be affected, so we're pretty much on the page with the NFU on that. In any one year, nobody can predict how many people are going to die. So there is no way of being able to make this sort of comment about 27% of farms, because all they've done is taken 1 year and taken the stats from 1 year.
And you mentioned that you don't want things to get more maverick, to get more rebellious, at least not a week today, next Tuesday. It's around about this time next week those protests will be winding up, and we've asked a number of those farmers attending to join us here in the studio for a cup of tea to talk through the day. And anybody who's attending that protest now, please get in touch. We'd love to hear your voice with the People's Channel. But we have spoken to farmers, Gavin Lane, who said that they are increasingly exasperated to the point where they may start downing tools, they may stop food production, or they may stop the food getting supplied, so that people, maybe in cities, who enjoy their metropolitan lives, they used to have their vacuum-packed reality delivered to their doorstep, who don't understand, perhaps, the realities of the supply chain. Maybe that's what it would take, farmers downing tools and going on strikes before government officials and the public wake up.
Well, I hope we don't get to that stage, but I think we need to just tone down the inflammatory comments on both sides and try and look at this in a really measured way over the next week or so, and hopefully go back to the government and hear what they have to say after the rally on Tuesday.
But that sounds great. You sit around a boardroom, you have a cup of tea, you have a nice little biscuit, and we all agree to do a complete U-turn on a policy which would totally humiliate and embarrass the Chancellor, the Prime Minister, a new Labour government, a flagship policy. It's very, very unlikely they're going to do that. So, will farmers feel exasperated to the point where they will step up? I'm not encouraging it, but I'm saying if playing gentlemanly rules doesn't work, you can understand the frustrations.
Yeah, but at the same time, I don't think rioting is going to help.
No, I'm not saying rioting. They were talking about supply chain issues and downing tools so food doesn't reach supermarkets. That's what they were saying, not what I'm encouraging.
OK, well, I just really hope we don't get to that stage. I just think it would backfire. We need to take the government's, the public support with us. And I think that we have the trust of the public. Farmers are well trusted by the public, and we don't want to abuse that trust.
And yet, Gavin Lane, the types of farmers' protests, and again, I'm not saying we should echo them in Britain, but the farmers' movement we saw in places like the Netherlands in response to punitive emissions targets, fertiliser, the costs, the costs of diesel, tariffs, import duties with Brazil, the rest of it, that annihilated farming in the Netherlands, in France, in Germany, across the European continent. Those farmers' uprisings were very, very widely supported by the public because the public tend to support something that's fair. And it's a matter of fairness when you talk to a farmer who's barely earning the minimum wage, for the hours they put in, over the endless hours they put in through a day, and yet they have no control of the price they're allowed to sell their produce to. You know all this. I'm preaching
we share their frustration. We share their anger. We felt that we had the reassurances from Steve Reed when he came to our conference last year that APR wasn't on the agenda. That was reiterated throughout the year, and then this bombshell landed on us really, really quickly. And I think we're only a couple of weeks since the budget. We've got a week till we have this rally. I think at the moment we're very in the early stages of this, so I don't want to sort of preempt anything by saying that we need to start some sort of huge strike or close down the UK food system. I think that would be completely counterproductive. I think we've still got to talk. We've got time to talk, and we've got time to try and work this out.
But if those talks reach loggerheads, if those talks come to naught, if, as I say, the tea and biscuits route doesn't work, farmers just can't take this lying down and watch multi-generational farms simply be hoovered up by corporations, by big landowners, by solar farms, by wind farms, perhaps by the government themselves to build housing estates. Because that's what I hear from farmers all the time, and you must hear even worse.
Yeah, we hear a lot of this, but I think it's mainly supposition. I think we have to work on the facts at the moment, and I really think that there's somewhere that we can go to negotiate. I really do. Honestly, I wouldn't be in this game if I didn't think we could get through this by talking rather than doing any other direct action.
And Gavin, it's fair to say, I think, that it's not just this Labour government that's been criticised, has not been especially helpful towards farmers. The previous government seems to take their eye off the ball too. Do you think that's the broader issue here? The political class has just seemed to take the farming community totally for granted.
The big problem with what we've got with the removal of agricultural property relief is that it will cause a reduction in, as a lot of the people you've spoken to have said, it will cause a reduction in investment in their farms. And if they reduce the investment in the farms, we will just not get growth in our sector. And the government has spoken endlessly about this whole idea of growth and investment. and I want to see it in the rural economy as much as I want to see it in the urban economy. And if we start seeing people having to take money out of their businesses to pay for inheritance tax in the future, that will be the end of that investment.
OK, thank you very much for joining us in the studio. We have to leave it there. We simply ran out of time. That's the Deputy President of the Country, Land and Business Association, Gavin Lane. Thank you very much for joining us, Gavin. Now, earlier on, I spoke to former Labour spokesperson James Mathewson, who had this to say.
Well, people who own their own land here, we're talking about landowners predominantly. We're not talking about tenant farmers even, who make up 30% of the stock of farms in the country. We're talking about landowners, people who own land and own quite a bit of land as well a lot of the time. So, it's not going to affect, this policy is not going to affect 70% of farmers, but it is important that the government still listens to people. I think Andrew, who you've just had on, was a great credit to the farming community. He's making the points very clearly. He's not outraged. He's not spitting feathers in the way that some of those in the NFU seem to be doing. But we have to remember that because of this difficult situation with the public finances, with the finances the government has inherited, there is no easy way forward. When they did the Rose Garden speech, way back when, this is exactly the kind of thing that we're talking about, because there was going to be dissatisfaction. But when it comes between somebody on universal credit who has absolutely nothing and somebody who owns swathes of land and is farming that land through their own choice and through their own career decisions, where does the axe fall? I mean, between the two of them, there's no comparison, really.
Well, there we go. That's the Labour spokesperson's point of view on that matter. There's loads more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, including we'll look at one school's controversial call to ban the word Christmas from their end-of-term Christmas pantomime. What a load of bar humbug that is. But first, here's your latest news headlines, and it's Sophie Reaper.
Thank you, Martin. Let's take a look at your latest headlines. And we'll start with some breaking news now. A spokesperson for Avon and Somerset Police has just given a statement following the death of a 17-year-old girl on the M5 motorway last night. This is what they had to say.
This is a hugely distressing incident and one that will no doubt cause great shock amongst the public. Our thoughts and our sympathies are first and foremost with the girl's family. A specially trained officer has been assigned to keep providing them with updates and support, not only today but in the weeks ahead too. Due to the seriousness of the incident, a mandatory referral was made to the Independent Police Office for Police Conduct in the early hours of the morning. The IOPC has notified us they will investigate the incident independently.
A spokesperson for the Prime Minister has said that Sir Keir respects the decision of the Archbishop of Canterbury to resign. They also added that the PM's thoughts first and foremost remain with all the victims. Justin Welby stepped down earlier today following a damning report into a prolific child abuser associated with the Church of England. The reports concluded that Welby had failed to act after learning about the abuse by John Smythe QC in 2013. In a statement, the outgoing Archbishop said the following: "Having sought the gracious permission of His Majesty the King, I've decided to resign as Archbishop of Canterbury. It's very clear that I must take personal and institutional responsibility for the long and re-traumatising period between 2013 and 2014. Terminally ill adults who are expected to die within 6 months would be able to request assistance to end their own life. That's under the proposed end-of-life bill. But someone with a disability or mental health issue would not be eligible. The controversial bill has raised some concerns that people could feel pressured into ending their lives prematurely. MPs will have their first vote on the proposals on the 29th of November. A once-a-day pill that could help tens of thousands of people give up smoking cigarettes and prevent thousands of smoke-related deaths each year will now be rolled out on the NHS. The pill works by tackling nicotine cravings and also helps with withdrawal symptoms such as irritability and trouble sleeping. Official estimates say it could help more than 85,000 people give up smoking over the next 5 years. Gary Lineker will step down as the host of Match of the Day at the end of the current season. The 63-year-old former England striker has presented Match of the Day since 1999, but now Mark Chapman, Gabby Logan and Alex Scott are the current frontrunners to replace the former England star. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophie Reaper. More from me in the next hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone,
Sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
But first, here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.280 and €1.205 euros. The price of gold is £2042 and 20 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 80.53 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a fine day for most of us out there, but there is some fog remaining in places and there'll be further fog continuing overnight. Also some frost under this area of high pressure which is keeping the weather settled at the moment, and it's a clearer area of high pressure compared with last week. And that means less low cloud, although there is still some patchy cloud, especially for East Anglia and the southeast overnight. Some showers running into Kent, along with a brisk breeze. At the other end of the country, northwest Scotland prone to thickening cloud and some drizzle overnight. That keeps it mild, but in between, a slice of clear sky and some frost and fog to wake up to first thing Wednesday. So for northwest Scotland, it's a milder start to the day with cloud and drizzle coming in from the northwest. And that's going to slowly spread its way southeastwards through the day. But it's bright enough for Aberdeenshire into the Grampians first thing. Northern Ireland, a fairly mixed bag in the morning with a lot of cloud cover, some mist and fog patches. Wales, plenty of bright weather. That's also extending into parts of the Midlands and northern England, although some fog and frost will be about first thing. Fog and frost free in the southeast where we've got some cloud and some showers early on, but actually the showers largely disappear by the afternoon as the wind direction changes. Meanwhile, cloud spreads across much of Scotland, avoiding the east but also spilling into Northern Ireland, and it'll be a milder day in the northwest with highs of 12 or 13 Celsius. Plenty of bright weather further south though, and we end the afternoon with some sunny spells for the south and southeast after a relatively cloudy start. Nevertheless, it does turn cloudy fairly widely on Wednesday night, and into Thursday we keep that cloud cover, so a milder start to the day, but then it turns colder during Friday and Saturday from the north.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems in Cheshire on the M62. The two inside lanes blocked off eastbound from junction 11 to 12 heading towards the M60 at the Eccles interchange, basically heading towards Manchester following an accident involving at least 2 lorries. On the M1 in Buckinghamshire, the northbound exit is closed. This is just north of Milton Keynes. A lorry has caught fire at the Newport Pagnell services. That is causing long queues where fire officers are at the scene. On the M25, on the western stretch, there are long anti-clockwise queues after a crash at the M4, queues back to the M40. And on the M4 heading out of London, the entry slip road is partly blocked just after junction 3. The Hayes exit, a van has broken down. Recovery work is underway. And in Wiltshire, Northgate Street and Devizes closed following a building fire. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:41. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, a village school head teacher has sparked fury across the nation after requesting that all reference to Christmas be removed from a traditional Christmas festive pantomime of Jack and the Beanstalk being staged for young pupils. Now, parents have slammed the decision not to include anything about the Christian celebration, so the event can be, of course, inclusive for children of all faiths, except, it would seem, Christians. Now, let's find out what makes my next guest thinks of this, and I'm joined by the comedian Josh Howie. Josh, welcome to the show. Freshly shorn, loving the new look there. Beautiful stuff, Josh Howie. Talking of which, a lot of people aren't at all happy about this. Are they right to be unhappy, or is it just more confected outrage at Christmas time?
No, I think they're right. I think it's ridiculous because there's an hypocrisy here that isn't just
with this school. It's arguably with wider society. That was a Freudian slip, sorry. It's that you've got institutions, like in this case the school, saying, hey, we're inclusive, and making a really big deal out of that. And that's great. Inclusivity is fine. But when you actually then aren't inclusive to your own indigenous culture, in this case Christianity, and there's an argument whether even Christmas as a holiday, how Christian it is anymore. So to sort of just take out any mention of it in what is a very sort of traditionally winter fair of these I can't even say what the word is, of the plays or whatever. I'm sorry, I've never actually been to one because I went to Jesus and the Giant Beanstalk. I don't know if that counts. And it was really good. It was like, where's God? He's behind you. But it was. I just find it hypocritical. And the fact that they're saying that, we're trying to be inclusive and we're trying to make sure that all the kids can come. It's like, if your parents aren't going to let you come because there might be a Christmas song or something, it's like, I think social services need to be called.
Yeah, Josh, my kids go to schools locally and my missus is a teacher there, and it absolutely is routine that nativity plays now. Kids of other faiths just don't send their kids along. And let's be honest, this is overridingly Muslim parents keeping their kids away from Christian festivals like this. They don't send them to the Christmas plays. And yet, throughout the year, everybody is encouraged to be inclusive around Eid, around Black History Month, around every festival of every other religion. Everybody is encouraged to be inclusive, but it seems that you can opt out of Christmas and no one seems to care about it. It's an acceptable form of discrimination.
Well, look, we're talking about it, and the parents obviously do care about it as well, but you're totally right. Could you imagine if a parent said, I'm not sending my kids in today because they're going to learn about Eid? Like, that would be like, you're Islamophobic, you're a bigot, whatever it is. It's just, this is the great thing about this country, we are inclusive, we are welcoming, but that goes both ways. And being, like I say, it's a Christian culture. My kids go to a Jewish school, but I wouldn't, not let them go to a play that has a Christmas song or something. I mean, I'm not going to take them because, I can't stand it, but they can go.
At least you're honest, but you're absolutely right. My kids get taught about all faiths, all religions, all of their ceremonies, and they love it. They love learning about different cultures, different faiths. It's a very, very multicultural school. It's South East London. And yet, I'll just put it to you again, it is completely normal and mainstream for the Muslim parents to pull their kids out of the Christian festivities. I just think it's a terrible shame. I don't hold anything against them. It's like, what's the problem? Learn about the Christian God. Learn about the fact kids can have an amazingly fun time at Christmas, dressing as sheep, pretending God's behind a beanstalk. It's fun. What's wrong with having fun and embracing all cultures?
Absolutely. It's fun and it's silly, and it's not even like the message of Jesus as being like rammed down their throat or anything. It's part of the indigenous culture. And it's an important part, and it's a shame for people to miss out on that. But more than that, it's a shame for the school to make that decision for all these other parents. And that's what I think is under their guise of diversity, then you lose out on part of what makes you unique and special.
Absolutely well put, superb stuff. Always a pleasure to see you, my friend Josh Howie. Thanks for joining me here on GB News. Thank you. Thanks to see more of Josh Howie, of course, on GB News in Headliners, and that's at 11 p.m. tonight. He's in there getting his stuff together. But in just a few moments, we'll cross live to protesters trying to get the government to reverse their decision to surrender the Chagos Islands. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
In 2020, after almost 80 years, Oxford University's Pitt Rivers Museum removed its famous collection of shrunken heads with sewn-up lips and eyes made by the South American Shuar and Ashwar people. How do museums decide what should be shown and what should be confined to storage? Can controversial exhibits be left on display with suitable contextualisation in captions? Who would want to be a curator facing such controversial questions? For review, I'm delighted to be joined by journalist Eitan Smallman. Welcome to GB News. I think many people, when they hear that we're going to discuss museums or art galleries, think that it's going to be, oh, that wokery question. But it strikes me, and I think it strikes you too, that this is not just about wokery at all. There are some really interesting ethical questions here. For example, I mean, let's start with this one, and there are several examples of it. Should we be displaying human bodies, the remains of human beings? Should we be displaying them in museums?
Absolutely. It's not just the usual suspects, young snowflakes, who are objecting to these things. They're just naturally cultural shifts, and people of all ages and all political persuasions may feel uneasy about displaying human remains of any kind, especially human remains that have been taken against the will of the communities or taken violently. Hilary Mantel led a campaign to remove a 7-foot 7-inch skeleton of Charles Byrne, known as the Irish Giant, from the Hunterian Museum. He had specifically said that he didn't want to be displayed and didn't want to be taken by anatomists, and yet was displayed for a couple of hundred years until a couple of years ago. He hasn't had the burial he requested, but he's no longer on public display.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:49. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, loads of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on today's show, the big stories of the day. Now, if you haven't done that, you can still do it by visiting gbnews.com/your say. Now, on the topic of that school in Hampshire banning the word Christmas from the Christmas Nativity play Jack and the Beanstalk this year, Alison says this: my company has called the Christmas party this year the end of year festivities for the last few years on top of that. So I've simply refused to go. Christmas is Christmas. What's their problem? It seems to me everybody's being inclusive except about Christianity. Do you know what? I totally agree with you there, Alison. Lee adds this: with his shaved head, Josh Howe, he looks 10 years younger. Do you know what? I thought totally the same. In fact, I didn't even recognise the fella. He looks like a whip, a snip of a lad. And John adds this whole debacle with the farmers shows that we need a massive demo to call for a new general election. Moving on now quickly, a call to action rally is being held in London this evening as protesters rally against the handover of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. Now, according to organisers, there'll be more than 500 people from the islands in attendance this evening as they try to convince the government to reverse their deal to surrender British sovereignty of the territory. Our reporter Adam Cherry is on the scene for us. Adam, welcome to the show. The demo is about to start. Tell us more.
That's right, Martin. Yeah, I'm here at the rally. It begins in about 10 minutes' time. As you say, around 500 to 600 Chagosians expected here. Lots of high-profile guests, lots of MPs here. We'll have Andrew Rosendale from the Conservative Party, Zia Yusuf, the chairman of Reform UK, and others, and Chagosian speakers, all rallying against the decision by the government to hand over the Chagos Islands to Mauritius just over a month ago. Of course, it's been a hugely controversial decision, hence why there will be so many people people here. It's going to go on for about 2 hours, so there'll be several speakers, and I'll be chatting to you later on in the show about it. And so it's a big deal. And actually, whilst you're here, Martin, I've got a guest. We've got Lord Daniel Hannan. Hello. Lord Hannan, thank you for joining us here on GB News. Can you tell us a little bit more about why this rally is important and what it means?
Yes, I mean, this is a rally about the rights of the Chagosian people who have been unconsulted. Their voice has not been heard, even though they are the people with the most at stake. I think what happened is that Labour just got caught out here. They are conditioned to see everything in kind of decolonised BLM woke terms. So they saw a poorer country making demands of us, and they rushed to accommodate them, even if it meant paying for the privilege of giving away territory. Right? But then, of course, it emerged that the people concerned were not part of that conversation. Mauritius, although they want a right of return to the islands, don't want any right of return for the Chagosians, only for their own population. They make it illegal to call yourself a Chagosian there, right? By the way, amazing that we've somehow become the bad guys here when it's Mauritius that actually makes it a law punishable by 10 years in prison to do what these guys are doing and to, as they would say, dispute the sovereignty of Mauritius.
Do you think the election of Donald Trump will make a meaningful difference on this?
Well, look, I would really like... I mean, obviously, Donald Trump wouldn't give away territory, certainly wouldn't pay. I'm not the biggest fan of Donald Trump, but he recognises a bad deal, right? So I think we can safely say he wouldn't do that. But I think the vital thing is to buy time for a consultation. And I would like to see, now, the government has accepted that they can't do this without primary legislation, so there needs to be a bill that goes through Parliament. That means that you can amend the bill so that there should be a consultative referendum. Now, I get a referendum isn't easy to organise, right? The Chagosian population is dispersed. There are some in the Seychelles, there are some in Mauritius, there are some here, mainly in Sussex, but some in Manchester and other places. But, you know, that's not a deal breaker. I mean, I'm in the middle of voting for who should be the next Chancellor of Oxford University. They're managing to do that over 5 continents, right? You identify who you are, you identify that you've got the right to vote, and then you get a vote. So that should not be a reason not to go ahead.
Well, Lord Hannan, thank you very much for joining us. We'll be hearing from you later on this evening as well. Thank you. Well, there you are, guys. It kicks off, as I said, in about 10 minutes. So there'll be a lot of... we'll be coming back to this, and I'll be chatting to you at about 7:30, Martin. So for viewers at home, stay tuned for that shortly. It's going to be a big rally here. Lots of passion, I'd say. Lots of people waiting outside to come in and make their voices heard on this very important topic.
Excellent stuff. Adam Cherry there, flying the flag for Chagosians. And as said, we're back to that later on because I'm covering for Nigel Farage tonight, 7 till 8. We'll be going back to that. Jubes & Co. is up next. As I said, I'll be back tonight at 7. Please tune in. Have a fantastic time until then. Now, here's your weather. And it's Aidan McGivern. Thanks for your company.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a fine day for most of us out there, but there is some fog remaining in places and there'll be further fog continuing overnight. Also some frost under this area of high pressure, which is keeping the weather settled at the moment, and it's a clearer area of high pressure compared with last week. And that means less low cloud, although there is still some patchy cloud, especially for East Anglia and the southeast overnight. Some showers running into Kent, along with a brisk breeze. At the other end of the country, northwest Scotland prone to thickening cloud and some drizzle overnight. That keeps it mild, but in between, a slice of clear sky and some frost and fog to wake up to first thing Wednesday. So for northwest Scotland, it's a milder start to the day with cloud and drizzle coming in from the northwest. And that's going to slowly spread its way southeastwards through the day. But it's bright enough for Aberdeenshire into the Grampians first thing. Northern Ireland, a fairly mixed bag in the morning with a lot of cloud cover, some mist and fog patches. Wales, plenty of bright weather. That's also extending into parts of the Midlands and Northern England, although some fog and frost will be about first thing. Fog and frost free in the southeast, where we've got some cloud and some showers early on, but actually the showers largely disappear by the afternoon as the wind direction changes. Meanwhile, cloud spreads across much of Scotland, avoiding the east but also spilling into Northern Ireland, and it'll be a milder day in the northwest with highs of 12 or 13 Celsius. Plenty of bright weather further south though, and we end the afternoon with some sunny spells for the south and southeast after a relatively cloudy start. Nevertheless, it does turn cloudy fairly widely on Wednesday night, and into Thursday we keep that cloud cover, so a milder start to the day, but then it turns colder during Friday and Saturday from the north.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. There are long queues heading east towards Manchester along the M62. Two lanes are closed off just west of the Eccles interchange, just off the M60 at the scene of an accident. And in Wiltshire at Devizes, the A360 is closed along Northgate Street, just off New Park Street after a fire broke out in the building. There are long queues in East London heading out of the capital. It's down to a single lane on Aspen Way just before the East India Dock Road tunnel because of roadworks. Queues back to Tower Hill. And in North East London, the North Circular very slow after an accident at Cooks Ferry. On London Underground, the Piccadilly line remains suspended between Rayners Lane and Uxbridge because of the bad weather. And there are severe delays on the Elizabeth line on the western section from London Paddington to the Heathrow terminals following a track fault and Acton Main Line. And that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
There's only two and.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun. No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Jubes & Co. Coming up tonight, Nigel Farage is increasing the pressure that he's putting on to Keir Starmer's government. He is demanding that information is